Right. Okay, no stress. There you go. All right, welcome to day 4 of our industry talks. We are quite excited about our lineup this morning. We have got some incredible guests joining us for the talks today, and the first up is Mr. Philip Hollander from I believe everyone knows the firm Hollander Furniture Design. We are thoroughly excited to hear about your talk, to see your presentation, and yeah, I'm gonna hand over to you. Let me just bring this up again. There we go.
Great. Good morning, everyone.
We're not sure. Don't think that's
It's not displaying it.
displaying it. Yeah. 1 second, everyone. Everyone, we're going to get started in a second. Throw us the desktop out. Yeah, we'll try that. Stop sharing for a second. Try that sharing. Check on right. Okay. Right, you're good to go. All right, morning everyone. Great to be here, just share a little bit of our journey and kind of the things we've learned through making some mistakes at Hollander. We are a furniture design and manufacturing company based in Johannesburg. We make furniture out of solid oak.
And the range has grown quite a bit from our first range in 2017, where we were asked to manufacture some furniture for a restaurant chain. At that point, we were doing whatever we could to survive. We were doing shop fitting for famous brands. We were building Fisherways and Debonair's counters for our sons. But then at some point, we started focusing on what we really wanted to do, and that's furniture. So this is a kind of an early kind of look at what our furniture used to look like. And like all things, and especially design, your first edition is not always the best. You can't be too hard on yourself, because design is a living thing. It's a changing thing. So through time, through iterations, through learning and making mistakes, we've changed to a better product offering, something that's a bit more complete, something that's a bit more a lot better in terms of design always. So we've got a range of furniture, from seating, some cabinetry, beds, tables, couches, things like that. And the range has grown over the last 7 or 8 years. But it's not very easy to get there, especially as a manufacturer. There's always challenges along the way that you have to face. We grew the factory. Well, let me just go back there. To produce this, you need something, and that something looks like that. You need a facility. You need machines. You need equipment. You need space, and with that, you also need people. So the nice thing is that people are keen to learn, they're keen to grow. But if you don't invest in your people and developing skills, not only your people's skills but also your own skills, things kind of get out of hand. The demand for our product grew quite a lot in let's say from 2017, where we started focusing just on solid wood furniture, on designing and making furniture that we wanted to do, started saying no to other work, and that's really when the business started to grow, because we were doing all of these things, and the hardest thing for any small business is actually to say no to work. This is not really what I want to do. This is not part of my kind of greater vision or goal. But when we started saying no to doing the shop fitting and doing all these other things, making office furniture and building kitchens and everything we had to do, all of a sudden the business started growing, because we focused on what we really wanted to do, what the grand vision or the goal is for Hopeslander. And as the demand grew, the company also grew. We went from, let's say, 15 employees in 2017 to 20 the year after that, to 30 the year after that, to 40. And we've got over 60 employees at the moment working in our factory. And with that rapid growth, and it's almost like a kiss of death, you want that growth. You want to get better. You want to employ more people. You want your business to grow. But with those challenges, but with that growth comes challenges. And after these years of rapid growth, our factory started looking like this. Just chaos everywhere. And I remember in April last year, the demand was through the roof. That was never the problem. The market's not the problem. The problem was us actually being able to deliver. And with this demand and our lead time just going up and up and up, we just more chaos gets introduced to the system. Trying to get our products quicker to the product, to the customer, trying to eliminate our waste, but in fact it just gets more and more. So everywhere so when I walked through the factory, I just realized that this is the worst that it's ever going to be. And we need to change. We need to change ourselves. And the real problem was not the people on the floor, the people making the furniture, our craftsmen and our employees. The problem was actually me. Because if you want to take credit for the things that's going well, the things that's nice, you also need to take credit or take the blame for the stuff that's going wrong. You've got to be able to know that you've got control over the culture that you create within your company, because culture is effectively just group habit. And if you set that group habit, if you set the standards, then people can follow that. People get pulled to that. So this was as a result of a lack of leadership. I then, by chance, someone I shared some of my difficulties with another guy in the industry, and he told me, like, there's this really quirky, random American dude called Paul Akers, and he wrote this book called 2 Second Lead. And I wrote this book, and immediately I knew what I had to do. And it was actually very bizarre, because the day after I finished reading the book, I met Paul Akers. It was just, by chance, he was on his way to Namibia on a family holiday. And as I was listening and reading the book, I was writing down notes on my whiteboard. And a guy visited our factory, and he said, this is strange. These things look like Paul Akers' teachings. And I said, yes, I'm reading this book now. It's like changing my life. It's exactly what I need to do. I need to grow a culture. I need to grow my people. And he said, he's in South Africa tomorrow. He's giving a talk at the airport. He's on his way to Namibia. It's profound. So I went to the talk, and it completely changed my life. 6 months later, after finishing the book, I found myself with Paul in Japan. Because Japan have really affected the way that culture of harmony, of respect comes together with a manufacturing powerhouse, or the idea of manufacturing at scale. So we visited a few factories, we visited some schools, we visited their post office, we visited their waste facilities to find out how do they actually marry this idea of respect and growth with even low-level jobs like gardening, which is someone standing there putting brackets together, and it goes into a car. So we visited some Toyota facilities as well, and we learned how Toyota evolved from a automatic loom company 130 years ago when Shakichi owner Taiichi Toyoda developed his mother's loom into a automatic loom. She was manually weaving garments, and then he developed her loom, and they sold the rights to that loom, which he developed over time, to the Platt brothers in the UK, and that was the seed funding for Toyota Automotive Company. And they also then went to the US and learned from the people in the US, from the Ford production lines, and they brought it back to Japan. The one thing that they did well was, and I think that's the thing that the West kind of lost, was the respect for everyone in society. We as well, we've got a very linear kind of structure to our organizations. You've got the CEO right there at the top, and you've got the the cleaners right there at the bottom. Whereas in Japan, it's a lot more horizontal, and that's what they've done right, and that's what we went over to learn from them. So this, you won't believe it, but it's actually a rubbish dump in Japan. So it looks like a school, and they've actually introduced part of their curriculum. Kids, I think, are around 6-7 years old. They have to go to the rubbish dump to learn. Now, a big thing in Japan is training. So they train consistently. And everywhere we went, it kind of felt like they were treating us like children. But they've got this open mindset, this curious mindset, learning, never stop learning. And not actually like letting your ego get in the way. So this is where they actually, they don't recycle really, but they collect rubbish, they process it, and then they incinerate it. Then they incinerate it to create electricity. And when I got back from Japan, one thing that I learned was, being a creative, or using that term creative, you almost think it gives you the right to be a bit sloppy and be a bit disorganized, because it kind of gives us the right to go, no, I'm kind of creative. I don't like structure. I don't like discipline. I don't like being too organized, because it gives me that creative freedom. But I realized in Japan that that's actually a myth. Structure. This is what my drawer used to look like. Chaotic and just a bunch of stuff, and I struggled a lot to find anything. When I got back, started introducing what we call 3S. So every morning we spend a bit of time organizing your space, cleaning your space, and just kind of removing that mental clutter that's in your mind. So we start off with our radio taisho. So this is the hotel and the factory. For about 4 or 5 minutes, we all do stretches together. And it just allows us to clear our minds. Everyone rushes off to work, whether it's in a taxi or whether it's on a bus or in your own car. You get there and you have to maybe had kids screaming in the car, or whatever. It's all just a rush to get to work. And this just allows us to reset our minds and get into the right mindset. Also just kind of get the blood going and get some fresh blood into your head. We then go through a daily agenda, and we do this every single day, where we share mistakes. The best things I've learned in my life has been through making mistakes. So why won't I afford my employees the same opportunity to make mistakes and not get chewed out? Because when I walked through the factory more than a year ago, and everything was chaos, every single corner there were mistakes being hidden, and tools were broken, and power tools are missing, and cutters are chipped. But no one owned up to this. It's because we had a culture of pointing fingers and shifting blame. We didn't have a culture of embracing mistakes, celebrating mistakes. So we changed that in our morning meeting. Behind this Ray that's standing here with the mic, we've got a big screen, about this size, where we share our, if you made a mistake the previous day, you take a picture, you send it to our WhatsApp group, and then the host of the next day would show it on the screen. And then what happens is, people start intuitively owning up to those mistakes, because after you share your mistake, they actually give you a round of applause. And there's a lot of lateral learning that happens. So everyone gets an opportunity to learn from your mistake. And what happens is, when someone, because we also give the person a mic, tell us about your mistake. I measured this thing wrong and I cut it before actually making sure it was supposed to be like this, or this joint was faulty and I tried to force it, or my tool was missing, so I tried something else and it didn't work. So intuitively, people start actually solving their own problems. They're owning up to the mistakes, and they're going, I should have done that, or next time I'm going to do this. And they learn from that, and it just gives everyone an opportunity to learn from it as well. After that, we actually start off the day with shout outs and gratefuls. So the first point of the agenda is the grateful. So everyone can share what they're grateful for. Most of the time it's grateful for the weather, grateful that my football team won, or grateful for for kind of on the surface level things. But we've had people share things like, I'm grateful, I've been looking for my family for 10 years and I finally found them. So all of a sudden, we're connecting with our our peers in such a deeper level. And I hate it when companies throw this term around, we're like a family here, which is never really the case. You're a family until you do something wrong when you're out the door, But this just gives us a sense of connecting with one another on a much better level, on a personal level. Then we do shout outs. So if someone's done something to help you, if someone's trained you on a machine, or someone assisted you with anything, then someone's done their job exceptionally well, then we do shout outs, just to give recognition as well. It's so important that we actually recognize the small things. And I used to find myself saying a lot of the time, before going to Japan, I'm not going to praise a fish for swimming, but it's actually so wrong. We've got to celebrate the small standards that's being abided to. It's not just when you're exceptional. Celebrate the normal, celebrate the standard. They say set the standard, inspect the standard, and celebrate the standard. That's what they do in Japan. Okay, so it's not just when you're exceptional. You've got to celebrate the standard as well. So after the shout-outs, we share the mistakes, and after the mistakes, we share improvements. So for the first almost hour of each day at Houtlander, no one works on production. So we've got our stretches, we've got our morning meeting, and then after that, we call it 3S time. So you sort, you sweep, and you standardize. So everyone goes back to their workstations, and they say, like this gentleman here on the right, my extraction's not working. We're giving them agency and control and resources over making changes, improvements to their own working space. So, whether you want to fix your extraction, whether you want to 3D print a stand for your water bottle to go, or design a little thing and laser cut it where you can put your tape measure. We give them free rein. We've got a little improvement cave at the workshop. It's got a little 3D printer, laser cutter, and a vinyl printer. If you want to print stickers or labels, you can do that. If you want bins where you can put some of your gear, some of your hardware that you use, you can do that. And it's important to give people the agency to do that. Not just, you can't solve problems for your staff. You've actually got to give them the opportunity to make those improvements themselves. Because they actually want to be creative. We think that it's only trained designers or creatives that's got the ability to think creative. But we're all, everyone's got the ability to be creative. And the moment you give people the possibility or the agency to do that, they just do wonders. So after the 3S time, and by the way, like if you want to watch a YouTube video in that time, if you want to read a book, we've got a library in our boardroom as well. Everyone, whether you're the cleaner, whether you are, a industrial designer at Houtlander, everyone's got the free rein for that time during the day to make improvements. So this is a good example of once we've given someone the agency and the ability to fix things themselves. Because I used to go to this drawer and open it up and go, this is madness. Like, how can you guys work like that? I would just shift the blame and go, like, fix it. This is not great. Didn't really give guys resources, didn't really give guys training on what they can do and what it should look like. And by watching YouTube videos of what other factories look like around the world, they say, oh, okay, wow, this is actually this is what possibility is. And when I opened the drawer the other day, it looked like that. And that's just without any of my intervention, without any of our kind of scolding and shouting, they managed to change. And this is just like a CNC operator that just that did this. A guy without any academic training besides matric did this. And this is really my point, where we think that the chaos and the freedom that not being structured and disciplined allows us to be creative. But actually it brings so much burden. It muddies your mind so much that the only thing that we were doing anyway as a management team was putting out fires. So there's very little time for us to actually be creative and be free. And by giving everyone in the factory agency to make improvements and improving the way that we produce furniture, actually allowed us to step back from that chaos, stop putting out fires, and really just let our minds go on what the possibility is for Oaklander as a business. And this allows us to have dream of things like this. Be creative, be fluid, and be free. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from anyone?
Yes. How do you ensure the quality of your product so it remains consistent at every stage of development? Especially considering that it's new manufacturing on such a large scale.
So we struggled with that quite a lot. And then at some point we realized that we call it, in the factory, we call it shared ownership is no ownership. So the moment we give one guy the moment we give a lot of people the authority or the mandate to check quality, no one really does that. So a lot of people go, well, if I give two people the mandate to look after our vehicles, then no one's really doing it. So you have to give one person that role. So what we've done is we've given one person at each workstation the role of checking quality. So there's no finger pointing. There's really no discussion around who's actually responsible for checking quality. But it's we also that's why we're sharing the mistakes, so that we don't have a culture of hiding defects and hiding mistakes. So no one, like everyone knows they're not going to be chewed out for making a mistake. So it's very easy to, and we call it stop, call, wait. It's very easy to stop, call, wait till a supervisor or a team leader comes and inspects the quality, because you're not going to be chewed out. We actually encourage stop.
How did you manage before implementing the system of order and stuff? How did you manage dealing with the backlog or meeting the demand when you had to produce for retail or whatever? How did you deal with that? I mean, that you were cluttered, you were behind on orders and stuff. Like, how did you navigate those conflicts?
Yeah, that was one of the hardest things to actually stop. So what we did is we said, okay, for the next 12 months, we're not going to design any new product. We're going to control the WIP. So we control the work in progress. So we basically throttled it a little bit. So basically taking short-term loss, for a long-term vision. This is the great thing that Japan does well. They've got this really long-term vision. Companies have like 50 to 100-year goals. And so we've had to take it on the chin, and if anything, our lead time got longer through this process, because what happens is by pointing at all the problems, because you have to point at them before you can actually fix them. You have to stop, and you have to reduce the time, or add the time that you spend on fixing those problems. So it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. So we also say, we go slow to go smooth, and smooth to go fast. So in the future we'll see the return on this investment.
One last question. Mentioning how companies in Japan have these long-term goals, where Oaklander is today, what's the trajectory you see your company going in the next, let's say, 10 years?
So I'd love to grow. I'd love to have more than 100 employees working for Oaklander, maybe even multiple factories, and the dream would be to actually export to Europe. And I think there's a massive market for us there. But to get there, to be able to employ 100 people, we need to get the foundation right. We need to get the foundation strong. And this is about creating a culture of continuous improvement, of agency for everyone. And we realized that if I throw 10 more people into the factory, it does nothing for the throughput or the bottom line. It actually just, we introduce more waste into the factory. So you're stripping all of the problems out, fixing them, and then slowly going to be building up the company from there.
Thanks. Fantastic presentation. I want to ask, pre-Homeland, what led you to the point to say, I can now open this tract? And then, what also, because you said there's a factory I need to hire, there's machinery I need to, in order to produce, because I can get a client, how do I produce for those clients? Where does that income come from? Or was it me taking a loan? What led you to that? Because it's a risky endeavor in the first place. So I want to know, what was the pre-Homeland and what was your background? What was your inspiration that led you there?
Yeah, so I've never really had another job than Homeland. So as a student, I was making furniture for family and friends and people like that. And when I finished my studies, I actually studied at econ business management, but I've always had this love for woodworking. It's how I paid for a lot of my studies. And then I got into after I studied, I applied at Ferntech, which is a government subsidized incubation program for people in the furniture industry. So I got into that program. They then sent me to Sweden on a furniture design exchange, and this is where this world of design opened up for me. I came back, and it was just me, and being in this incubation program, having this massive facility that I shared with about 10 or 15 other companies, small companies, allowed me to just organically grow. So grow my market, grow my skills, grow the product, and employed 3 or 4 people at that point, and then it just started scaling. So every time we do a job, I'd use that money to buy a new machine, or not a new machine, a second-hand machine, and it basically just started going from there. So I was lucky in that I didn't have much commitments, didn't have a wife or kids or anything to look after. So the risk factor for me was relatively low, and just invested everything back into the business. So basically a very organic approach to growing the business. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is you can outgrow yourself so quickly, and you can make these big commitments of make big amount of debt that really puts you under pressure, and then you have to take all of this work in that doesn't really align with your long-term vision. So I was fortunate in that sense of just being able to grow the business organically.
For the process that you guys, like any other factory, they have artisans, quality controllers, and project managers. Can you typically the team that you guys have as a factory, it's sort of been giving you the process?
Yeah, sure. So we've got we're basically a 3-man design team that's in the design office, and then we prototype we're all skilled carpenters, so we prototype the products as well. And then we've got our separate workstations. We've got a breakout team that basically takes the raw lumber and cuts it up into pieces and optimizes that. We've got a lamination team. We've got a turning team. We've got our CNC team. We've got a sanding and finishing team. So basically, we've got little small kind of micro teams that's got a team leader, and then we spend a lot of time coaching team leaders. And then they in turn get a lot of time to coach their teams. So the one thing I can say, one of the changes we've made was that we were operating a lot of kind of in silos at some point. So my office was upstairs, and then the production planner and manager was in another office, and then the sales team and HR was in another office. And then we all, at some point, just it was such a barrier for communication and open dialogue and solving problems took so long that we scrapped that, we knocked the walls out, and we're all in the same office now. So we can solve problems quickly, we can have conversations quickly, you know, so it's made a massive difference, you know, to just bringing the team together. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if I did. Okay.
Any other questions in person here? How do you market yourself?
So at the moment, well, initially it kind of just snowballed. So we did a lot of trade shows, and then we meet a lot of interior designers and architects and specifiers at the trade shows and have conversations with them. And then, I mean, we were lucky enough to enter the market at a point where I think the publications are all that kind of hungry for new things. So we got a lot of publicity through some of the magazines and blogs and things that were relevant at that point. But now at this stage, you know, we've got you know 60+ people that we need to keep busy. So you know, at some point you actually have to go to field market. So we use a lot of Facebook and Instagram marketing. We spend about 15-20 grand a month on ads there, and then we do some Google AdWords and kind of just optimization in that way. And then we use some we endorse influencers and things like that that actually share our products, which is proven to be quite quite a good investment as well. So yeah, we just like to get product in front of people as much as possible. So social media is great for that. Yes.
How do you create a balance between doing your work creatively and also keeping the function of it?
I'm not sure if I understand your question.
Like designing in a creative way, maybe so that project is sort of unique to you.
Yes.
And very like something like that showing me.
Yeah.
But also, how do you guess that the function is still there? This is still a chair. This is still a table. Like, how do you go about doing your projects?
Well, we try not to think, or I try not to think too much about the end result. I'm a maker first. I've been making things since I was little. Building tree houses and just playing around with wood. Not having a design background, I think, kind of helped in a sense, where I like exploring with the physical form. So, and a lot of the times, something kind of presents itself to you in the process. So I really love the process of making, love the process of iterating. So, I mean, we've done a lot of things that ultimately at the end, it doesn't work and you've got to scrap it. So it's also like not getting your ego in the way, because sometimes you've got an idea, or you think you've got an idea that's going to work, or it's going to look great. You've got a design that's going to be the next best seller, but when you get there, it's not that. It's not what you kind of anticipated. So I would say the main thing is like just keeping your mind open and keeping your expectation kind of in check. Giving your expectation, your ego, kind of, not that get in the way of it. I hope that answers your question.
So there's a few questions online. Bringing them up on the screen here. There we go. Right, so start something. Yeah.
You say some of the best designs are found through mistakes. Well, I would say there aren't any designs that doesn't have some mistakes in there, and that's really the core of making improvements. It's being open to finding those mistakes and finding the things that could make the product better. So don't shy away from mistakes. Don't shy away from the issues. Those are the things that you actually need to embrace and improve on. If I create my own unique furniture design, where should I register it? So we've thought about this quite a lot, about kind of the IP around the products and the design. Design is such a difficult thing to register, or when it comes to furniture anyways. I think most products are like that, where if someone just changes the design slightly, it constitutes as a different design. So for us, instead of spending a lot of resources on trying to protect our design, we thought it would be a better investment for us to use that resources and build the brand. People very rarely buy a product. They buy a story. They buy into what you represent and how that makes them feel. So rather, that was our approach anyways, rather spend that energy and resources in building a brand and telling the story than trying to protect it, out of a kind of a legal sense, because it's very difficult and also takes a lot of resources. What wood in South Africa is preferred for general furniture, table and chairs? So unfortunately, timber in South Africa, one, it's not really, besides Seligna and pine, it's not really commercially grown or commercially available. You get some things like piart and some mahogany that is indigenous. But the problem is that the way that it gets harvested is not very sustainable. It's very difficult. It's not very well regulated anyway. So a lot of times they start on the one side of the forest and they start cutting down the trees. Doesn't really matter what tree it is. That's for the mill to figure out. So what we've done is, and I went to mills because I really wanted to be part of the story. We use African timber, timber that's grown on our soil, but we just couldn't find timber that's sustainably harvested and commercially available consistently. So we import all of our wood from America. So we use American oak because it's the most widely available hardwood on the planet. It's also, the people that own the forests, and 95% of the forests where these trees come out of are actually privately owned farmlands. So they understand the economical value of the trees and only harvesting them when they at the kind of maximum capacity and as big as they are going to get. So they harvest these trees that's 200-300 years old. When they've reached maturity, when they start decaying and releasing carbon into the atmosphere again, they harvest the trees then, and it's actually a carbon sink. So by the time that the material lands at our door, it's still carbon negative. So the amount of carbon that the tree took to grow is more than all the energy that was dispersed to actually get the material cut, dried, and shipped to South Africa. So to answer the question, really depends on what type of furniture you make, because our designs are slender and we want to make furniture that lasts for generations. Unfortunately, pine or Seligna is not really, it's not the work for our design. Do we have access to wood from Scandinavian countries? Yes, so birch and beechwood are kind of the most widely used woods in Scandinavia, and you can, most suppliers, wood suppliers, would do stock that. Not birch, but beechwood you will find. Yeah. Yeah, considering the wide use of software in industry, when someone wishes to test your furniture within a space, do you have 3D models available for the software? If so, how do you prevent someone from simply stealing the model and use in their business, or make an off-brand version for cheaper? So we've got 3D models for all of our products, and we're very open to supplying all the interior designers and architects with our models. Once again, this kind of ties into the previous message: how do you protect your design? We spend our energy in building the brand. Okay, so anyone can try it. we know how difficult it is, to run this factory and to actually produce this furniture at scale. So if anything, I always say I'm very happy to let anyone come to our factory to learn from us, whether you and other furniture makers that we're actually competing with, because I don't see any of the other people, whether it's a James Mudge or David Crano or Kino or any of those people that also make furniture, they're all welcome to visit, and they've all visited my factory because they are not my competitors. Every good experience that a customer has from buying something from any South African designer maker is good for me. Because next time they're going to look for something else, and they say, well, I can actually trust the South African supplier, I can trust the South African designer. They actually produce world-class goods. So as a whole, we don't compete with each other. We compete with the guys that import. The big change that say that they're South African companies, but they're actually getting all this furniture from Indonesia and India and all these places. We're not, those are the people that we're competing with, not with anyone that's doing their own designs and making furniture in South Africa.
Wonderful. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure. I think everyone found great value in it. I think we'll keep the door open if you want to
Some of these, but
So what do you do with the rice? You want to do check, can anyone online give me fine? Can anyone online give me fine? Guys, keep it down a little bit. Thank you, Mone. Perfect. They're in good hands. All right, everyone, our next presenter is architect, mentor of mine as well, Gregory Katz. We are also thoroughly excited to hear from him. And I think quite a few people on the line in the session will also know who you are. So I think without any further ado, once that's not the presentation, technology is always against us.
Okay, you'll be able to change. Yes, they see that.
Yeah, well, are they seeing?
Yeah, just check. Now. Oh. I just need you to show us.
yes.
Try it out. Yeah. No. I'll do it via Windows.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Morning, so nice to be here. Thank you, Ruben. I just want you all to know that Ruben actually, and I see Taryn there as well. These two are some of the best students that I've ever taught. I mean, you're in good hands here, let me tell you. Let's start with a stretch because, I don't know, Philip inspired us. So let's everybody stand up. Let's just have a yawn and a stretch because we need to oxygenate the brain. Let's get it all out, take a deep breath. Okay. I'm Gregory Katz. You can follow me on Instagram or my website. There's some details for you. It was very inspiring to hear Philip's talk and very interesting as well to see how there seems to be something in the ether, you know, like we're all kind of, us designers, we're all thinking in kind of similar ways these days. And you'll see quite a few overlaps between my talk and his talk. Just briefly a bit of my backstory. So I was born here, educated my undergrad at UCT, but I'm Joburg born and bred. For my master's, I had the opportunity to go to New York overseas. And I studied at Columbia University, did my master's program there. I showed this slide because this is what New York looked like at that time. Not at all what it looks like now. It was very gritty. This is Canal Street, and there were a lot of stores like this that offered materials, just like very interesting materials for a young aspiring architect to kind of engage with, just to walk around the streets and find those circuit boards and find those little pieces of rubber and interesting perspex. And I was like a bit of a hoarder, and I kind of magpie collected all these different materials and built up this materials library. And it was really the origins of my strong interest in material technology. Also worked for some interesting architects when I was younger. This is Zvi Hecker. We built this building in Berlin. I worked for Studio Daniel Libeskind and slaved till all hours of the morning making intricate models like this. And then 9/11 happened. I was outside of the country, came back to South Africa because the airports were all closed. And there were things were happening. It was like the late 90s, it was 2000, and they were building the constitutional courts. Newtown was being redeveloped, and there's a lot of energy. And I got a job working for OMM and Urban Solutions to build we were working on the constitutional courts. So that's kind of my backstory. Today, I run my own practice. I have been doing so since 2006, so like quite a long time. And I also teach. I teach at the GSA at UJ, at the Graduate School of Architecture. And I have this interest in design and design, particularly design as research. So I think that very often when we think about research, we think about somebody with like a clipboard going around, you know, and a bunch of questions, asking people questions, or maybe looking through books and sitting at a desk and typing up research papers. But actually the process of design is any kind of iterative process that you repeat. When you make something, you learn stuff. And I think that was kind of the point of Philip's talk, right? That like you constantly learning things while you're on the job, making things. And that also constitutes research, and there's a body of knowledge that we as practitioners accumulate over time. And I'm really interested in unpacking and thinking about like what it is that I've actually learned over all this time. So this is just a brief kind of like snapshot of that. I actually put this together like 2017. So it's not a full kind of list of all the projects in the office. But what you see, if you look at this list, is, and it's kind of like on the x-axis is time. So these are projects that are coming into the office over time. All the projects, that blue band at the top, are projects that fell through for one reason or another. Sorry, that grey band. And then the blue block at the bottom was all the projects that were on the board currently at that time when I kind of made this infographic. And you can see the ebbs and flows of work coming into the practice. So the steeper the incline of the thing, the more rapidly projects were coming in. And you can kind of read the various cycles of the economy in this diagram. And they often refer to architects as like canaries in the coal mine. You know, I don't know if you know that analogy, but like we are a very good indicator of how the economy is doing at any given time. So you can kind of read the 2008 financial crisis in this diagram somewhere. And while I was looking for images for this talk, I came across this image, and it's of a site very early on in my career. And what you'll notice, actually the image still gives me the hives just to look at it, but what you'll notice is like some aluminium just lying around there on this work site. And it got me thinking about like, what was it at that stage of my career that kind of made me fall for this trick that contractors will often perform? You know, they'll often tell the clients, we need to put through this order, you know, now because the prices are increasing, and then you will kind of like place that order, but they're actually worried about their cash flows. They need the cash. So it was just the naivety, it points to a kind of naivety and even a kind of hubris of starting out as an architect, and things that I've learned along the way. And that brings me, and Philip will like this slide, to these three Japanese concepts that, look, I'm no expert. I've been to Japan, but I'm no expert on Japanese culture. So like, you know, feel free to kind of correct me if I've misinterpreted some of these. But these three concepts kind of like really resonate with me in terms of thinking about how I practice, and I think a lot of architects experience practice. So the first concept is shoshin, which means this kind of beginner mindset, and it points to that slide that I just showed you, you know, that actually we need to have humility and we need to approach everything with this kind of mindset that we're here to learn and that we're going to make mistakes, and that the best way to approach things is as a beginner. And I think that this term practice, you know, the way that we think about what we do as architects is so relevant, because it speaks to this idea of like incremental constant learning, right? That we're practicing, you know, that I've been doing this for 20 years and I'm still learning new stuff every day. Every time I'm on site, I see something and I'm asking questions and I'm learning. So I still feel like a beginner. And then the second concept is Kaizen, which means it's this idea that, you know, you're constantly iterating and improving, that you never kind of make the perfect thing, you know, that everything is this iterative, incremental improvement. And then the third concept, I think Tarin's quite familiar with this, is wabi-sabi, which means coming to terms with accepting imperfection and embracing it and learning to love it, learning to love imperfection in things. I introduced this slide because architecture is essentially like a violent act. We scar the earth, and I constantly stand up and mention this to students when I'm talking, that it's an incredibly permanent thing that we do as architects, and it just behooves us to take responsibility for that. This is where I practice. This is my studio. There are no bodies in there in this picture, but normally there's between 3 and 10 people in that space at any given time. It's a little box that I built on my property where I live, and that's what it looks like from the outside. And this was an incredibly, this was a small project, but a very personal project, and a project that I learned a lot from. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the learnings on this project as a way of kind of encapsulating those 3 Japanese concepts that I introduced you to. So it's made of light steel, and I was interested in this material. It wasn't very kind of widely used when we built this. It's slightly better known now. And it's a frame structure, and because I was educated in the States, that's kind of the principal building technology in America, is to build out of sticks like this. And so I felt kind of comfortable designing and working with it, even though I'd never built anything out of light steel before. That's what it looks like under construction. It's very dry technology. It's very quick, very efficient, structurally efficient, and materially efficient. But I got a big fright when they delivered all the members to site, because I kind of imagined that we'd all come in prefabricated panels in the back of a truck, but they delivered like literally hundreds of lengths of materials, just bundled with little tags on them and an instruction manual. So it was kind of like when I'm building that Meccano thing for my kids, and then you have those few screws left over that you like one day thinks, what went wrong, what did I miss? Only that architecture is at this other scale, you know, there's no, we kind of prototyping on the job. So that's a little bit scary. And you'll see over here, there's a spiral staircase and that landing that protrudes from the building. I bought that spiral staircase off Gumtree, and we inhabited this building for many years, very happily without any problems. But what we noticed was when it rained, you can see the diagram on the left, kind of shows the skin and how the skin kind of wraps around that cantilevering piece. But obviously this rubber shingle that we kind of clad the thing with, it operates like a raincoat. So, but the landing was kind of integrated into the structure. So you have the steel cantilevering, and it was just a point of entry for water. So whenever it rained, the water would run down the facade and kind of like creep into the wall at that cantilever, at the projection. And someone kind of described it to me as if you'd like tucked your raincoat into your underpants, you know, which is not a good idea. So eventually we remedied this. So I built this kind of like, designed this tower landing that would sit outside the structure, independent of the structure. And here you can see us kind of like, well, we demolished that cantilever and then built this thing out of just cement stock brick. But some of the kind of interesting learnings in making this very small intervention were, because I was my own client and like hypersensitive to costs, and also around a lot to kind of manage the process of manufacturing this thing. It was a very different way of working to what I'm used to. You know, we're used to kind of producing a set of drawings, handing them over to a contractor, and then there is a certain degree of improvisation on site, but you're not constantly on site looking, checking, okay, we set the rules here, no cutting of bricks, and we love the look of like a kind of face brick, or we're investigating how you can make stock brick in the same way that one would pay attention and care to making a face brick wall. So there was no cutting of bricks allowed, and we also kind of calibrated everything so that it was solid, full bricks and very neatly jointed. And then I bought these 1.2 by 1.2 concrete pavers, and we sliced those up, and we made the treads and the risers out of those. And because there's this discrepancy in the module between the 600 wide half paver and the 660 wide, you all know this, right? You're all architecture students here, I'm assuming. But the 660 millimeter wide bricks, uncut, is that little bit of an overlap. So we used that as an opportunity to mount the balustrade in that little bit of space that was left over. So just the kind of care, attention to detail, being on the job, learning as you're going, also embracing the imperfection of the thing, you know, just like that there were these discrepancies in the module, and then just like working with that to find a good solution. There were so many learnings in this tiny project, and I found it very gratifying. Sorry, I forgot to mention the reason we built the straight stair was because a lot of clients climbing up that spiral stair got dizzy when they got to the top. And that can be useful, but it's also not so good. I want to talk a bit about clients, because there I was my own client, and one thing I've learned over time is that dealing with clients is a kind of art, and the more you practice dealing with clients, the better you get at it. Clients are this incredibly valuable resource. I think architects often don't. I don't know that we don't. I don't want to say we don't respect them, but we kind of take them for granted. And it's very hard to find clients, and we need to kind of treat them very carefully. And at times you become the psychologist for clients, the marriage counselor for clients, the accountant, you play all these different roles. And all these skills are not taught to you. We are not all those things. We're not trained as these things as architects. But it's something that you develop over time. So in this project, I had a developer client. It was a very early project, and I cottoned onto this idea that, you know, a lot of clients find architecture fees expensive, and they sort of resent them. They resent hiring professionals. And one way to kind of get around that is to, instead of fees, to take a stake in a project. So over here, I came to an agreement with the client, with the developer, that I would buy one of the units at cost when we completed the project. So that incentivized me to kind of manage the costs very carefully, and that suited the client. And it was just like kind of a good working relationship. Another thing that I learned in this project was the importance of the team. This is our engineer and the contractor, and I was very lucky to find very skilled and professional people to work with on this early project. So it helps you as a young architect if you have a good team around you, and just learning the value of other people's opinions on site. To make perfect concrete, you need perfect shutters, and that was something that I really would not have known had it not been for this contractor. He had done work on the mines and had poured these massive machine bases with very, very little tolerance. And we made these custom shutters, and because we were reusing them on 3 identical houses, there was an economy of scale, and the thing worked. The other thing that I learned on this project was, normally when you build in bricks and mortar, you can chase services into walls, but here, plug point, all the services had to be documented upfront in drawings, and this was the product, and it was quite a successful project. But the next time I tried the same trick, taking a stake in a project instead of taking fees, and it didn't work. So this, often you think that something's a good strategy, but you learn new things on every job, and things change. So this project was for 9 units in Sandton, and I took a stake in the project, and this is what a unicorn looks like, in case any of you wondered. This is what they call a Regulation 38 clearance certificate, and it's issued by the council in order to get your subdivision through. And you cannot sell a piece of property unless you have the subdivision. And it just took months. It took more than months. It took years. The council were just dragging their heels and being obstructive. And my balls were in a vice for 3 years on this project. And what it taught me, though, is the value of time, like why developers value time so much. And it really made me empathetic to the developers' kind of anxiety around speeding things up on a project, because that interest bill just keeps ticking over, as the days pass. And when you're financially invested in something, it's very different to being just a consultant or a professional on a project. So I think that was a really useful insight from that project. In this project, I was commissioned to do an office building for a metals recycling company here on the East Rand, and they were very suspicious of architects. They were like, you guys are just out to waste our hard-earned cash on your decorative flourishes, and we're not interested in any of that. They made it quite clear up front. We want this very utilitarian building made of face brick, so we don't have to clean it or maintain it too often, and it must just be a box. So we had to convince this client that just by mixing the assortment of bricks on the facade, it wouldn't cost them anything extra. And this drawing, we kind of done the calculations to calibrate the amount of bricks that could be delivered from a particular yard and fit onto a single truckload or multiple truckloads, but we weren't wasting any bricks by changing the color of the bricks. And this is the result. The colors are quite saturated on the screen, so it doesn't look quite that red or orange. But the other interesting thing we did here was to use those corner bricks. So that you get like a special canted brick, which they use for windowsills. So to turn that 45-degree corner, we used that brick. Over here, we were working with another developer, and this was a building in the inner city. It was like one of the first new buildings to be built in the inner city for a long time, in decades. And in the initial feasibility for this building, we had a bunch of balconies around the exterior of the building. And the concept that we pitched to the developer and used these kind of diagrams to kind of explain the concept was that we would migrate all those balconies, all those little spaces on the exterior of the building to the interior courtyard of the building, and amalgamate them with the passageways. So normally you would have like a 1.5 meter passageway wrapping around the the inside of that courtyard. And we said, let's make that bigger. Let's add all that GLA, all that space in the exterior. And it was a pure cost benefit calculation. And we explained to the developer that by doing that, you're going to get common areas that will foster community, that will create a better vibe in the building. And we kind of did this drawing to show how we could make this kind of kinetic sculpture out of the laundry that would hang in these corridors. And you can see all the projections on the corridors here, how they're like kind of, the corridor gives way to this additional space and makes space for other activities so that this doesn't just become a route to get to your apartment. It's somewhere to hang out communally and use these spaces. And we programmed those spaces with wash hand basins, and people store their bikes there, and people sit and have a dog in the afternoon there. And it's just a very lovely vibe in this building. Building it in a courtyard fashion really helped us when it came to constructing the building, because we were able to put the crane in the middle and store all the materials in the middle instead of taking up space on the sidewalks around the building. And we used a concrete frame so that we could really exploit the potential of the brick infill to make a pattern. So here we are laying the bricks in a kind of header course so that you have this kind of pixelated brickwork, and then we can create this pattern out of the brickwork by just projecting some of the bricks proud of the facade. And yeah, and we made this kind of really interesting shwe-shwe-like pattern on the building, referencing the culture of fashion in the area. And it's quite like an iconic building. If you go to this part of the CBD, corner Fox Street, it's quite well known, this building. And we're constantly pushing boundaries. So our work is all about experimenting with materials and methods, ways of making buildings. It's very subtle. Sometimes the interventions are very subtle. So here, this is an adaptive reuse of an existing building in town, turning an office building into apartments. And you can see how we try to preserve the ribbon windows. It's very technical, this, but you need a fire break of 1 meter between apartments. And here we've just used the Georgian wire glass and chamfered them back. But the reason that I'm showing you this is because there's a building over here. So while we were doing this project, this building, I noticed this building as a parking garage, and it wasn't being used. And I turned around to the client and I said, we should do a project here. We should turn this parking garage into something. And so a lot of my experience has been about like spotting opportunities, doing the groundwork as a kind of on risk, and then converting those opportunities into work for the office. So, this gives you a sense of where the parking garage is. And then we just carved, we did this feasibility where we showed some units, we carved out the center because it's got a deep floor plate, we carved out the center to make a light well, and we made this wonderful apartment building out of a parking garage in the inner city. And more than making the building, we actually made this project. We created this project for ourselves. If I tell some of my colleagues overseas what it costs to make this, they wouldn't believe it, because our budgets are like really shoestring. So like all the hanging pendants are bought on Temu, and and the balustrading uses like very, very inexpensive polycarbonate sheeting. But I think it's like there's definitely an atmosphere here. We really, this is like alchemy. We're making gold out of something. I don't know. But it's largely about conceiving how to demolish buildings and to give them new uses. And this will be very, very relevant. Anybody interested in sustainability, forget about, is Philip gone? Good. Forget about timber architecture. It's wonderful, but it's imported. This stuff exists. This is where the carbon sink is, guys. These are buildings that are not being used. There's embodied energy here that we really need to figure out how to reuse. So most of my work today is about this, taking old buildings and finding new uses for them. We did this little experimental structure in Khayelitsha for a developer making backyard dwellings on multiple stories in these very compressed environments, using a barrel vaulted brickwork. So it's only made out of brick, no concrete, because you can't get a concrete pump in there. And it's all about like this kind of edge beam with a kicker angle that you can then put these shutters in and make a brick barrel vault. And that's the prototype we made. I'm rushing because I know we've only got a half an hour slot, so okay. This is a school that we made, and we've experimented with using these prefabricated concrete blocks. They're called wind blocks. They're widely available. They were developed as a window frame, basically, and you build them into the walls. But we've used them here in a different way. So a lot of what we do is like thinking about what is on the shelf already and how can we reinterpret how to use it. So we're making columns out of it and making this very kind of spongy, porous building that kids can like climb on. And that's the product. We put a slide in to get down to school. And yeah, it's just a very interesting application for quite a common material. And then in these long corridors, we used a no fines concrete. So in other words, it's a concrete that's poured, that's very porous. They remove, I think they remove the fine aggregate from the concrete, and it makes it very porous. And then we polished it. And this was a complete experiment. They poured no fines concrete before, but they never polished it smooth. So we were trying to polish it so that it didn't come out rough and, you know, if kids fall and scrape their knees. And it was marginally successful, although it's a bit too rough still. We liked it because, you know, it's always this balance between like, is this corridor going to get wet and is it going to be too slippery, or can you make it not slippery? And so we try to make something smooth and porous, but didn't quite work. And then there were some existing structures on the site which we demolished, and instead of carting all the material away, we just crushed that rubble and reused it to make this Teletubby landscape. That was kind of part of the playscape. But you'd be amazed at grass. What grass does is it sends these roots down and it just pulls all the rubble to the surface. It's like you on these mounds now, kids are like constantly finding little bits of broken up brick and things that we're having to deal with. So these are all lessons, guys. You don't have to make the same mistakes as we've made. This is a very interesting technology where they extrude using a running mold. They extrude curb edges, and it's quite good for landscaping when you have like undulating topography. That's the studio I showed you earlier on the left, and this is the house that I built and for myself and my family. And what I tried to do here was to exclude the main contractor from the project, because that's the best way of reducing costs on a build. If you can manage all the subcontractors, then you eliminate a big percentage of the cost of making architecture. And so we put up this concrete frame, and we use these coffered slabs to achieve quite big spans. These are mini coffers. You've seen them in parking garages, you know, before. So the home has these exposed concrete soffits. And then for infill, I was at the Corrie Brickyard, and I came across these like piles and piles, like tens of thousands of these special shaped bricks that Corrie Brick had made for some job that had gone south. And then they were actually like for windowsills. These are called plinth stretchers. And we used those as infill on the house, and we made these very interesting patterns, you know, on the house. Our flooring runs we used vinyl, just simple vinyl Marley sheeting on the floor, but we applied it in a diagonal pattern. The staircase came out all wonky, so we just chopped it, and that surface is now like walking on I don't know, rocks on Clifton Beach or something. It's quite nice coming down barefoot. The pleasure of living in something, well, there's pleasure and pain in living something that you've designed. And the pleasure is like kind of these things that you notice at different times of day that you wouldn't necessarily notice when you're the architect on someone else's project, because you're not there at night and you don't notice the way the bricks have the silhouette, and maybe you don't notice how the way that the sun shadows come through the glass kind of replicates the pattern that you've made in the vinyl on the floor. The pain is that you're confronted with your blind spots like every day. Here we put the door handles in the middle of the doors instead of in the side of the doors. Somebody said that's stupid because there's the lever arm force or something, I don't know, but it works for me aesthetically and from, prize aesthetics. We positioned all the windows very high up on the first floor, like 1.5 meter windowsills, and then no lintels. The windows go, I'm allergic to lintels, don't do lintels. The windows go all the way up to the slab soffit, but then, you have to get on like a little box in the corner if you want to look down to the garden, but you get these wonderful views of the sky, and Joburg has the most amazing skies. There was this column on the patio that was really getting in the way, so we demolished it. But before demolishing it, we put that rebar in. You see that thick rebar that's running from the slab to the roof slab, and then tensioned it by heating it up and then welding a plate to the underside, and then as it cooled, it just like pulled the plate up to the slab. And there it is without the column. I don't want to go on too long. You can just, I'll take 2 more minutes just to run through quickly some other projects so you can see the scope of the work that we do. This is a house made of, it's 200 square meter house made of pavers. You can see the texture of the pavers over there. It's like 50 millimeters, very thin brick. A lot of people, wouldn't necessarily think that there's an application for pavers in construction, but there is, and we proved it here. Just exploring lots of materials, but really the best thing to come out of this project was the friendship that we made with the clients, and then they called us back during COVID to make this little Japanese pod for them in their garden, and we're prototyping all the time with things. This is a house in an estate where the rules of the estate, these estates, they have these rules, like you have to have 30% stone and face brick, and like it needs to look exactly like this. They're trying to homogenize and still give you freedom. So we put all the face brick on the back, so we hid it. So we wanted this white pristine box. We wanted our house to like stand out in this estate. So we hid, you can see all the face brick around the back, and we got called into many meetings to explain how we'd met the conditions of the aesthetics guidelines. And the hardest thing with this was to make this pristine box. This is a big learning. Is, simple is hard. What do they say? Simple is hard. Yeah, simple is hard, because like to make a skirting where the skirting disappears, you need to bend up an angle, and then, because your skirtings are essential, you can't get away without skirtings. That flooring, when it meets the wall, is just going to be a mess. So you find all these ways to kind of hide all the details is very, very tricky. And making gutters that don't appear to be there, but are like kind of set back in a building is very difficult. And then we made this project, which is just like call it the Great Primary Shapes House. It's made up of a circle and a hexagon and a triangle, and you get the picture. And there's a mix of materials, so it's concrete and face brick, and very interesting forms. I'm a formalist, like you can see in my early training. I worked for guys that were like strong formalists, and so I really believe in the power of form. And each of these spaces offers something different to the users. Each one is a different room. And we just made this thing that I'm quite proud of. But this was really the lesson in this project, was when you make a frame and you draw it, architects love, well, not love, but we kind of obliged to make cut lines because we don't know how deep the foundations are going to be. But on a triangle like that, the foundations actually get wider as it goes down. And something I never thought about when we were drawing it. So the builder built this triangle, and he measured it, but he measured according to our drawing, and didn't realize that he'd actually founded it much deeper. So the triangle was actually much wider when it got to this critical point here. This is at ground level. It was meant to intersect perfectly with that, corner of the hexagon. And so what you see over here on your right is the demolished concrete that came out of, it was a result of that mistake. But you learn by doing. We made this. This is also on the site. I'll leave that slide up for you to read. And in case you think that all our work is quite glamorous like this and we're just having so much fun, this is actually what probably 80% of the work in the office looks like now, which is reusing these office buildings and office parks, cutting them up into apartments. Sometimes we're cutting them up into storage units. We're doing feasibility studies, lots of spreadsheets. Sometimes this is what creativity looks like, guys. Yeah, I don't want to depress you too much. Okay, my slideshow is frozen, so maybe that's a sign. I'll take questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, so prototypes always cost more than the projected costs because we had to make that formwork, so those bent up forms for the vaults were once-off cost, and the idea was that you reuse those. But they were incredibly, I forget now because the project was like 5-6 years ago. I'm still looking for an investor to kind of take the project forward. But it's hell of a cost effective because it's literally all bricks and sand. Instead of a concrete, there are no slabs, like we're using pavers set on river sand on every level. So the big cost savings. But if I were to guess in today's terms, it would probably be around 8,000 rand a square meter, and they're about 30 square meters. So you can do the math. Okay. Yeah.
So, when you materials to kind of explain to them what you're doing and how you're using the material.
Yeah.
Do you get any kickback from council? Is there anything?
Yeah. It is complicated. It is complicated, and I think a lot of it is a question of like not explaining too much. So it's about withholding, unnecessary information, and then when the drawings go out to the contractors, obviously you need more information. But we try and not alert council to too many issues.
And then just to follow up on that question, in terms of your clients, what's the easiest way to kind of get them on board?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little story about that. You know that shapes project that we made? So those clients came to me and they said, we have quite a clear picture of what we want. We want it to look like this. And so it was a bunch of boxes, right? And so we said to them, okay, leave it with us. And they came back a week later and we had 3 little cardboard models with boxes stacked in different configurations. And I gave them the boxes to go home with and pick one. And they came back to the next meeting and they were not sure, but they thought they preferred this one. So I said, okay, great, we can go with that. But actually, I've been thinking about something else. And then I showed them this on the computer screen. And I said, we've just been playing around with some other ideas, not necessarily for your project, just like research we're doing. And they loved it. They said, oh, actually, that's exactly what we want. It was nothing that they were not thinking at all like that. So a lot of the time, it's this kind of like game of offering clients things, offering them choices, not showing your preferred choice up front because you don't want to feel pushed, you don't want to be pushy, and clients don't want to feel like they're being pushed in a particular direction. So it's about leaving space for decisions to emerge. And so there's kind of like a game and tactics that you learn over time.
Yes, hi. As let's say someone who prioritizes form in the project that they do, how do you go about form finding buildings then?
Yeah, it's such a mysterious process, like designing architecture. When I was at Columbia, it was like the beginnings of kind of parametric design, and we were playing around with like CGI and really like with these very, very advanced forms. I think I am a formalist, but I also am quite disciplined in my approach to form. So like I have a good understanding of the type of space I want to make, the quantity of space I want to make, the volume of the space I want to make, and then it's about how you connect that to other spaces. But it's very difficult to articulate this process. It's like kind of in me and emerges through a process of drawing and making actually models and working things out on a computer. Yes, great.
Recently, I read something about a study that was done about some of Europe's most famous modernist architects. It turned out that many of them had gone to kindergarten. And kindergarten had introduced the system of, this is kind of speaking to your point, system of blocks and games that you could play with geometry. And it turns out like Le Corbusier had gone there, I think Mies van der Rohe had gone there, but it's also kind of evident that for me, that there's still a deep child that's at play in this work.
Yeah, very well observed. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, as a child, I'm actually very introvert, and I used to spend a lot of time on my own, just making little spaces and building with blocks and making things out of cushions. So that it was definitely kind of very formative that time in my life, and I still tap into that definitely. Yeah, thanks for that.
Any other questions?
Just showing you here pictures of prototypes that we make at home. Like I'm always experimenting with the scale, like with furniture and things. Both, but primarily these days on the computer. Yeah, the computer is a very useful tool because it's accurate. There's a degree of inaccuracy that you want at the beginning of your thought process. Then very quickly, I like to make it accurate. And I just find it's like very efficient in terms of getting the results that I need. So, yeah. It's completely integral, and such a good question. You know, this idea that you kind of think that design emerges as a process of kind of like drawing without thinking about how it's going to be made is an anathema to me. I never really understood that. Like for me, the question of how it's going to be made needs to be integrated and worked into your thinking very early on. I think that's it's actually essential for making a good architecture, because to design something and then come to that question later, you've almost kind of like, well, you've excluded a lot of possibilities by doing that. And so to let the materials and the methods of making feed into and inform your design process is advisable. Strongly advisable. These are just quick, images of student work at the GSA that our students are doing. Just if anyone's interested as well. This is my other passion. This research. Okay, thanks. Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Sorry for the short silence, everyone. I just want to make sure that everyone online can still hear us fine. Wonderful. All right, we're just going to very quickly set up here. And we'll get started with the next presenter. It's just a PDF, right? Nie tag nodig en sê dis 'n presenter. Ek nie 'n tag nodig nie. Maar is in my laptop. Bring hom net terug na dit. Have you got a coffee? Can I sort you out after?
Ja.
If I can just, while we're just finishing off setup here, if I can just ask everyone in the online session, if you can pop me an email directly. We've captured your names, obviously now for CPD purposes. Please just reach out by email so that we can send you your CPD certificates during the coming week. All right, I've reposted my email address in the chat as well. Thanks. All right. Okay, I see some people ran off. I'm sure they'll come back just now. I would like to present our next presenter to you guys, or introduce our next presenter. This is Jennifer Law from Phasian Design Lab. We're thrilled to hear from you.
Thank you.
We've got quite an interesting topic today, which I know a lot of people will resonate with. And thank you again for coming through to our talks. We appreciate it greatly.
Thanks, Ruben.
There we go. Just control.
Cool. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Law. I used to work with Ruben, actually, at a company back in the day. Just as a small little background, I'm a WITS graduate. I graduated in 2007. I worked for a medium-sized commercial firm for 6.5 years. And then I opened my own practice back in 2014. A lot of my work as a student, as a young architect, and as practicing now, is heavily commercial based. So I work with the developers, and I do a lot of like residential commercial work, ranging from low-cost housing, social housing, student accommodation, to your more high-end residential projects in Cape Town and around the country. So today I'm going to be like the doomsday topic to everyone, to Gregory's very inspiring topic previously. I'll be talking about the impact of developers and how trying to cut costs in projects and why this often leads to negative outcomes. My aim is to show that the cheapest choice upfront can end up being the most expensive decision in the long run. Okay. Often in construction, I think with every single project, budgets are the pressure of having the budget is a reality. So, but from the developer side, you kind of got to understand that the pressures that they face. So they're in a competitive market and they get pressures from the investors and their shareholders because they push for returns and costs on the project, and that most of the time that controls the whole process, and that's always at the top of the developer's mind. So the biggest problem that arises is when cost saving becomes the only priority. This often results in substandard contractors being appointed, lower quality materials being used, or rushing of processes. So you'll find that building a building quickly, and then all of this affects like the final product of your building. These short-term savings also then lead to your long-term losses. Okay. This diagram basically shows that it's a classic view on how it explains project constraints. So you get your cost, your time, and your quality. And in reality, those three cannot be maximized simultaneously. It's impossible. So say, for instance, if you want cheap and fast, your quality will suffer. And if you want high quality at a low cost, that will take more time. So cutting costs almost always has a knock-on effect on either the quality or the schedule, or most times it affects both of those. Okay, so we kind of ask the question, why do developers do this? That they heavily lean into cutting costs. And I mean, firstly, they have the pressures of like the entire market, right? So they need to keep their projects within a budget so that they can then be competitive within the market. Secondly, they get pressures from investors' expectations. So their shareholders and their funders always want results that are quick and cheap. And they're always worried about what the bottom line is and how much a project can yield. And then thirdly, there's like the misconception that the cheapest contractor is more, or the supplier is the most cost effective, which is really, really the case. Okay, so typically how developers do tend to cut costs is they award contracts normally to like the lowest tenderer, even if their experience or their quality are not up to standard and are lacking. They sometimes substitute higher quality building materials with cheaper, lower grade materials. So just an example, say the cost for bricks. So clay stock bricks are like very expensive as opposed to a cement maxi brick. But like what happens is that a developer would most likely go the maxi brick route, but they then compromise like the thermal qualities of what a clay brick versus a cement maxi brick can actually do for your building. But however, they don't see those. They only see like the final figures and the final numbers and how much it's saving them on costs. Often they cut professional fees, and they either reduce the scope of a consultant, and then also they rush projects. So they shorten the program time of a project that's on site, and then you get your workmanship that's rushed, and often where quality inspections, internal quality control is often skipped. So each of these actions save money upfront, but they set up bigger risks later. Okay, so cutting costs almost causes like a domino effect, right? So think of it like as cost cutting. That's like the first domino, and as soon as you push that triggers this huge chain reaction of things that people don't automatically like think about upfront and in the beginning of a project. Cheap contractors usually results in lower quality and workmanship, and that also results in more defects. So poor finishes, shorter lifespan, and increased defects. Poor material choices, delays and disputes. Normally what happens is that the reputation is damaging for the developer as well. Where most people will no longer want to rent or buy in future projects and invest in their future developments. So in the end, all of these supposed savings kind of vanish, and then they're replaced with these much larger expenses. So it's repairs and maintenance and legal disputes, and all of those kind of exceed your initial saving. Okay, so from my experience, because I do this and I get this a lot, I've worked with a lot of developers that have chosen the route to go with a cheaper contractor or cheaper subcontractor. So what happens is they choose a cheaper contractor to save money, and then during the construction, poor workmanship leads to repeated defects and results also in delays in the handover of the end of the project. So just as an example, I have a very small footprint, 310 squares, very small building, which we had to fit 54 luxury apartment units on. So part of the project was actually to retain the heritage facade at the base of the first 2 floors, and then we were going to build another 6 stories above. What happened is this project started very early. So it started probably in 2017, but we only start building and construction in 2024. So the project took long to get on site. So investors, shareholders, they bought this piece of property, and now they're investing all of this money. So they're bleeding money into this project. So they need to get this project done. So the program was that it was actually in all honesty, the project should have actually been like a 18-month project, but it then turned into like a 14-month project. So they jam-packed all of this into a shorter program time, so in their mind, they thought that could save us money, because obviously they then can transfer their units, and then they would no longer have to pay the interest on the site and this building. What happened is this project then, building in Cape Town's so expensive. So contractors, subcontractors, all of them almost cost like 3 times to 4 times more than building here in Joburg. So what happened is all the guys who tendered for the aluminium on the project, we had guys from Joburg, Pretoria, Cape Town tendering. And I mean, a lot of these aluminium companies have built around the country. So they went with the cheapest contractor, which is a contractor from Pretoria, a subcontract aluminium contractor. So as the project went on, they just were not performing, like in terms of workmanship. Like it was actually quite scary to see how this aluminium company installed the aluminium. It was just not up to code. There was no structural sealant. There was no rubber seals. As you can see the photos, they just, this is supposedly complete, but like they didn't cut glass correctly. So like in Cape Town, it's a disaster because especially on like the wind, the weather in Cape Town, it's like you basically have like horizontal rain. So in this project is still like we recently completed it. But within the first couple of months, maybe like a month or two, with the aluminium being installed, because there's gaps and they didn't follow the correct installation details and stuff, we landed up getting damp. The rain was just coming right through all of the aluminium sections, through the glass, because they didn't seal it, they didn't cut size correctly, there was gaps everywhere, they didn't seal around the frame externally, so they just didn't follow any protocols at all. So now it's just that knock-on effect now. So the aluminium, really bad contractor, it's affected the internal finishes, so damp from the inside, there's like damp buildup, there's bubbling of paint, bubbling of plaster, and for a brand new building, it's like, yeah. So what happens is that often the developer cuts the costs, and then those contractors either underperform or they just don't have the skill set to actually complete the project, and then that then leads to delays, defects, legal disputes, and then in the end, it actually just is a higher cost. So it's a higher cost for the subcontractor because now he has to go back and fix every single window in this 8-story building. And then it's the cost for the clients because now you have owners that have bought into this building and they are constantly complaining. There's constant damp now. There's still the problem with the aluminium. And yeah, so it just became like in my mind, this was a very big mistake from hiring a cheaper aluminium contractor. Yeah, that's just some other images of like, I mean, doors that are hung skew, and like these subcontractors are completely fine with their workmanship. They think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with how they've installed things, and they're actually surprised to find these on like a defects list or whatever. The other point that I'm also trying to prove is that like the main contractor is actually also responsible for their subcontractors. So with the subcontractor also didn't have in place like proper quality control like systems, because to get to a final product and your building still looks like this, there's a major problem with like contractors and how so whether it's a I don't give a toot attitude or if it's just a skill set in hiring like a kind of cheaper contractor to carry out the work. I don't know what it is, but yeah, most contractors these days, it's very difficult to find a contractor that can do the work that like Gregory showed, like that takes the time in like building those details and like figuring things out, advising, that type of thing. You very rarely get contractors like that these days. And you also very rarely get like artisan kind of craftsman builders that can actually like take a detail of a drawing and make it beautiful and like actually build it according to your drawings. Just as another example, it's another so this is a very good example of a building that I completed in Joburg. We took the time to kind of detail like these brick arches that you kind of have like two layers, one's recessed, one's like one steps out a little bit. And like we discussed this detail intricately with the contractor, and we said to him, can you build this? Are you comfortable building this? And he's like, fine, I can build this. We have stock bricks. I'm like, cool, we can make a stock brick look cool. It doesn't necessarily have to be a face brick. So we issued him all of these detailed drawings of like how to build these arches. So when we get to site, they built the arches, but like normally what happens is they would build a template, like have like a shutterboard or plywood template, and they would build according to that. But they kind of freehand did this arch. So it was like we got this very wavy arch. So what was meant to stay as brick, we then decided to plaster it, and then plastering it made it look worse. So like, so this contractor who is like, he was very confident that he had the skill set to do this, and like that we landed up with very wonky looking arches on this very like relatively large facade on Call It Drive. So everyone sees this, and so we actually had to fix this, and we've unfortunately had to plaster it, but it still doesn't look great. That is just, and then you kind of like got to realize that it's almost like you got to, as an architect, it kind of kills your soul because like you have these like great ideas here, and like it looks amazing on a drawing and everything, but like, if you don't have the correct contractor to execute it, it will fall flat on its face. And I unfortunately have dealt with that a lot across my entire career. Okay, so most times there's hidden costs that are often much higher than the initial savings. Defects, remedial work, all of that eats into a budget. Maintenance also over the building's life cycle becomes more expensive because of like the poor quality and the poor workmanship. That also often leads to like legal disputes. So like whether it's the developer with the contractor or the contractor fighting with a subcontractor, that type of thing. So, and then ultimately also the resale value of like these buildings are affected. So the reputation often of like the developer or even like the professional team unfortunately gets tarnished by all of this bad building. Okay, so what is our aim as architectural professionals? It's kind of our, like, we need to kind of convince developers that they need to understand to manage a budget properly and responsibly without sacrificing quality. So what often happens is like projects, they go through feasibilities, and often the feasibility is incorrect. So they have the wrong budgets, and then they want to build like this Ferrari type building, but with a city golf kind of budget. And that happens all the time. So as professionals, we'd like, it's best to try and advise them and try let developers see like that there's more to kind of cost savings and like yeah, so the key is also to value engineer things. So, and here the term that I highlight the word value because there's no point like cutting costs, but it's actually adding no value to a project. So, and then also I find that it needs to be done, value engineering needs to be done earlier in a project, in the kind of planning stages. And you can't be value engineering when you're on site, because that's also a big problem. Whilst the building's being built, you busy value engineering your project. Yeah, and then, I mean, most importantly also is to try find competent contractors. Competent, reliable contractors who can deliver quality, and you shouldn't just always go with the cheapest option. Yeah. A successful project has a few things in common. So here it's to invest properly in the planning stage, especially in the design stages. This allows for smart decisions to be made. So things that could save you money without compromising the quality of a project. Working with reputable contractors and consultants that understand that quality matters. And then also quality control across the whole project, not only from like a professional side, but I think you should also try and make sure that the contractors also have that quality control system in place throughout the whole build of a project. And then also to kind of balance the costs with like your long-term value of a project. So that it becomes like a sustainable project. Okay, space. So this is the picture of that building in Cape Town. The bottom section is the heritage facade that we had to retain, and then the black portion kind of splits the old from the new. And then yeah, I just want to reiterate again that like reckless cost cutting, that results in like higher risk, poor quality, and like a greater expense in the end. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the floor?
How do you then, you mentioned finding competent contractors, but then how do you verify or vet contractors? And do you have a set of contractors or a contractor you then recommend to a client as the best possible option for this project in the sense of, yeah, they're expensive, but compared to this list that you bought, and this one contractor is charging like $1 million and more, than it's the one that you have. How do you vet the contractor? Do you have any contractors, and how do you then advise the client that this is the contractor that they should go for instead of the cheap option?
So unfortunately, like most times, even though you try push that good contractor towards the client, and even though the client has also maybe worked with that contractor previously and they know fully well that they are really good, they just unfortunately won't pay for it. That's just how developers. I guess it depends on the developer, because you get your developers who don't budge on like a certain standard of workmanship, and then some that are just so focused on like the bottom line and getting a project on site and making money. And so yeah, so it's difficult. Like I think it's more like it's a learning curve for those developers more when they actually realize like the pattern of them hiring a substandard contractor is actually costing them money, that they'll hopefully get to a point where they'll be like, okay, maybe let's not go for the most expensive guy, but maybe like the medium costing company that could give us somewhat of a little bit of better quality than what the lowest tenderer came in at.
And have you ever had to take on a project, take over a project that was a result of poor contractor choices that you have to like salvage it by bringing in new contractors? Or how often does that happen as well?
I mean, it doesn't happen a lot. I didn't think it would ever happen to me, but it does happen. Yeah, and then that costs more money. So they land up. There's a contractor they appoint. This is an example. I actually did a building in Pretoria to build 18 residential units. They appointed a contractor, and he just was not performing for 6 months. Like we just had, he just did earthworks. We just only had a platform. So every time we came to site, there was just a platform. He didn't dig for any foundations, nothing. And honestly, I don't know why it wasn't a red flag earlier, and like why the clients and the project managers didn't make such a make a big deal out of it earlier. But like 6 months down the line, they were like, oh, okay, this guy's not performing. They then had to hire and appoint a new contractor, which then obviously cost them time, cost them money, abortive costs. The previous contractor bought like steel to put in for the foundations. He did like the platform was incorrect. There were so many things that were wrong, and there were so many red flags. And like, but it just took. It's probably like the legalities of things, but yeah, it actually just landed up costing more money. Yeah.
Why specifically do you undertake what is it, commercial work? Yes, specifically, why commercial instead of? Yeah.
I guess it's a personal choice because like I feel like it's kind of with a smaller house, there's more dealing with the client. It's more they have like all their personal kind of things that they want in a house. Whereas like dealing on a commercial bigger scale, fine, you have a client that thinks they're an architect as well and they have their say in things, but more of it is that you kind of have like a more bigger say in how things get done or designed. Yeah, I mean, I would love to work on like smaller projects, but I think it's just my way it's gone. I've done more commercial work. I also kind of enjoy it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm just kind of circling around, I think, some questions that you asked around. If the only language that a developer hears is dollars and cents, how do you convince them otherwise on the quality of candidate that the contractor is? And then two, since you kind of know some of these issues that might be coming forward, and if you already managed or won this developer, do you take on being a principal agent, or do you kind of just keep yourself as an architect and do a bit of quality control and documentation? Like, to what degree do you then take on a responsibility that you can see that I'm working with someone who's probably just not as mature as a developer, and we're going down a headache path when it comes to the choice of contract?
I found actually that the developers, because of the competitive market, they've realized that their portfolio is not as popular as like another developer's portfolio that like maybe adds a little bit of zhuzh into their units versus like this developer that's trying to save costs and does finishes at the bare minimum. What they forget is that people who live in those spaces don't want to be living in a space that's like almost like, a lot of them say it's like, feels like a prison. So I think from a developer side, they see the trend, and hopefully they're learning from that they can't always think about cutting costs, and like they have to also give a slightly superior product to the market, because otherwise their buildings are going to stand empty. No one's going to want to rent from them. No one's going to want to buy from them. And then in terms of principal agent, I stay away from principal agent. Purely just because it's, the headache of it. But most times on big projects like this, the architect, there's normally a project manager that normally takes on the principal agent's role. So I generally stay away from that, and I'm just the architectural consultant. Yeah. Less of a headache. But these headaches are in other areas.
In terms of it, obviously there's so many of these developments, you know, the value points, and I'm sure you've got a strong science in terms of the efficiency of these buildings. What's that little what do you have? Is one of your value adds then that you can add a little bit of truth for little budget to not make it feel like a prison? Basically, what I'm trying to find out is that with these, they've got minor decisions that your one spec or one 500 mil dimension away from making a prison versus I want to live here. What are those kind of key skills that differentiate, prison or
no, absolutely. Like so it's researching the market for like cost efficient and cost effective finishes, because like, at the end of the day, it's how you finish off a space, which kind of sells the product. So if say for instance you've gone like with concrete, so student accommodation is a big example. Concrete floor with like not plastered walls, that's cost saving. But to them, they're like, why are we living like this? It's like cold, it's harsh, it's a very terrible environment. So what you do is that you actually swap out the concrete floor for like an affordable vinyl timber, glue down, add a little bit of a skirting, you plaster one wall, because plastering all the walls is too expensive. So you plaster one wall, coloring, like how you actually stage a room also is like a big key seller to like students. So you make it feel homey and you make it feel, but there's lots of ways of making something feel like more higher end, at a cost effective and efficient budget.
How did you transition from working from another firm to opening your own practice and moving into commercial architecture?
That's a good question, because like it kind of just happened for me. I was so heavily like invested in working on like the commercial residential stuff when I worked for a company. However, like what kind of made me want to venture out on my own was that it got to a point where I actually wasn't doing architecture. So I got promoted to an associate, but then I was running the office as an office manager rather, and like managing project managers that didn't want to get managed. So I kind of hit a spot where I actually didn't want, like I wasn't doing architecture, and then almost felt like I was going backwards. So then it just happened that like an opportunity came and then I could actually leave the company and start my own practice. And I was just fortunate enough to have a fairly large project as my first project, solo project. And then it just came from that, like referrals and I guess the experience, because then like the people you work with as well, like the word kind of gets out of how you work and like your kind of ethos as a company. So then people want to work with you. And then that's pretty much how you get work. It's like through referrals. Yeah.
How would you go about contacting or being in spaces to find these type of people?
I recommend, so a lot of graduates, they like to go work for those big fancy firms. I mean, I've got nothing against them, absolutely nothing against them. You learn a lot from them, but you guys leave thinking that there's like this amazing large firm that I'm going to go into and like learn a lot. But I actually learned a lot from doing my internship with a one-man architect. He actually took the time to explain things and detail things and like explain things. And I learned like, and I got to do so much more than had I been in like a large scale firm where they kind of just put you in the corner and they make you do dot schedules, or they make you do the not so glamorous things. Go measure buildings. I mean, there's nothing wrong with measuring buildings, but like they send you out to do this shitty things. So what's nice about like a smaller firm is that you kind of get like a hands-on experience on like all aspects of a project.
I wanted to ask, like, especially in terms of budget, right? How do you ensure that you stay like conscious of your budget throughout whatever project you're working on and different projects? Like, at what point going over budget do you say, okay, guys, we're doing a bit too much, we need to bring it down a bit? And what points under budget are you like, I think we have been too cheap in these specific areas, we need to bring in better materials and things like that? Like, how do you stay conscious of your budget?
So generally you have a quantity surveyor on a project, and they normally have cost reports that sit in place with the clients every month. So that kind of keeps track of where you are in the program and then where you are in the budgets and like how you're spending. If you've had to put more money into something this month, or you've had to pay for something more this month, that it all gets controlled that way. But generally before a project goes onto site, it has to be within a budget. So some of the projects that I've worked on, unfortunately, some of them have actually been over budget before we've even gone onto site, and they've chosen to go on site with it being very well aware that it's a few million rand over, and they'll never gain that back. And then those are the projects that are the problem projects, because they're trying to value engineer at the same time that we're constructing, and then it's just like once a contractor gets appointed, they want to build. They don't want to like keep changing, and then you're on like revision X when it's like they're casting things. So it's you also got to be mindful of like the allowances that you have that was in the budget to work that you get given, and then you try to find all the finishes and everything within those allowances so that you ensure as the architecture professional that you're not over-speccing, or they can only afford a 50 Rand chair, but your chair costs 4,000 Rand. Like, you can't do things like that. So, yeah, so you're always aware of what the budgets are and like those kind of things. Yeah. Cool.
All right, there's one question online. What strategies can architects use to ensure proper quality control and workmanship during construction?
So during construction, I recommend that you actually do quality reports that you constantly send to the entire team. So whenever you do site visits or whatever, you would like, there's so many apps that are available that you can take a photo and do like a little like write up of what the problem is. Then that way then everyone is fully aware of like what the issues are and what you are as the architect that are looking at. And then they then also can then sense like how, like at the end, how you would snag something. Like, but yeah, if you go site every week or every second week, I recommend doing like quality control reports and then you issue to the whole team. Because that's also like also pointing like out the bad thing. Like why would, so if it's repeated, you can almost call them out and say, listen, like we pointed this out like 3 months ago. Why is this still a quality problem now? So it's also to cover yourself as the architect, but also to just make like the snagging process at the end of a project much better.
Any other questions from anyone? Yeah.
So, obviously, if you're good at choosing the most cost-effective way to proceed with the project, I can imagine that you get roped into doing the interiors of the project. How much does that happen, and where do you kind of draw the line between architect and interior designer?
So it happens a lot actually, because they don't want to hire an interior designer. And I think the line kind of gets blurred there. And then also, like you as the architect, because you're like, oh, okay, they've given me work, maybe I get another project from there, and they kind of dangle their carrot, and then like you are a sucker to like doing that work. So you kind of do it without increasing any fees, which is not great. It shouldn't be done, but like it happens. So you'll end up doing all the interiors as well. So like things that like all your kind of common area spaces or reception, you'll end up designing to like intricate detailing and stuff. So, and then you don't get extra fees for that because the developer's like, but you're the architect, you can design that. Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone online? Anyone on the floor? Cool. Happy days. I reserve my questions just before. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Ruben.
Was great to hear from you, and also to see the side of the design process. I think not many people speak about this. Yeah, we all see these developments go up, whether it be big buildings or these little copy paste gross things sitting next to the highway. You know, but few people actually see that side of it, and I think it's an integral part of our profession. It's there every day. So thank you for sharing that.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Cool. All right, so we're going to give just a 5-minute break. Let me just set up the next presenter, the last and final presenter for the day. So if anyone wants to stretch their legs a bit, we'll carry on at 22. Thanks so much. Just a quick sound check for everyone. I just want to make sure everyone can still hear us fine. Wonderful. All right, let me just share the camera again. Oh, it's pointing at the ceiling. I'll fix that now. All right. Okay, thank you so much. Our next presenter up is Joy Camkin-Smith. Thank you so much for joining us for these talks. I'm at least quite excited about your presentation. And I think it's a side of architecture that especially the aspiring architects very rarely get to see. So thank you so much, and I'll hand over to you. Thanks.
Pleasure. Hi, everybody. It's very intimidating walking in here and you're all sitting so far back. But I calmed down through Jen's talk. So my topic is quite philosophical, and it's because I'm doing the Masters in Conservation of the Built Environment at UCT. Having stumbled into heritage work, and I'm actually just sitting here thinking, my first heritage project was actually when I was at Gap, and I did Kippie's Jazz Club, where we demolished a portion of the club for the JDA, and we had no money, we had $1 million, and we had to make a project. So I ended up doing, and the Kippie's project is actually a pastiche of the original Anglo-American gentleman's toilets, which has since been fixed up. So we were working on the pastiche, but we had to copy the one facade and mirror it on the other, and then try and talk to Kippie and the jazz and the music. And so that was my first heritage project, which really came off the back of studying in Australia. And I studied under Dr. Judith Trimble, who was a brilliant historian. And for 4 years, she took us through European and Asian and Australian and global histories and theories. So I have this love for heritage. I know the buildings in Rome and Venice and everything backwards, but I've never been there. I have seen Japan and all of those other places, which is also a very huge influence to me. But I kind of stumbled into heritage and have ended up doing a lot of heritage work. My take on heritage is that it's actually heritages. And one of the most beautiful things about South Africa is look at all of us. We are a mixed bag of folk. Even the European of us, I'm a complete mongrel. My mother was French, my mother's ancestor was French, Huguenot, and Brit, and my father's ancestors were Scottish, but his mother was Afrikaner, Dutch, worked with the Dutch East India Company, and one of those guys never had a wife. So he bought a Bengali Indian slave, as they did in those days, because there weren't many women. So most of the families in this country are actually very, very mixed. And you see it when you look across the faces in our land, the Malay influences, the Indonesians. You can see it once you travel Asia. We are so richly imbued of so many beautiful cultures. And that's why I love South Africa. And that's why I came back, because I was out of the country for 16 years. Studying and having a child, and then I've got to come back home. This is the place to be. And I've never regretted that for a minute. So I'm a mongrel made up of all these cultures, and I love my South Africa with its Malay and its mixture of everything, which by and large we do see across the whole of the land, which is so amazing. From China to spices to all sorts of stuff. Now I'm trying to drive. Okay, so heritage and heritages is a very broad construct. And in principle, it's pretty much about managing change, okay? And there's this philosophical question called Thaddeus's ship. So you take the ship, this old ship, and it starts to get rotten. So you replace the rotten piece of plank on the ship. And the other one gets rotten and it gets replaced, and so on and so forth. And you finally end up with 2 ships. Which one is the real Thaddeus's ship? The one is rotten and unsaleable, and the other one is new and saleable. And that actually puts heritage in a nutshell, and conservation. It's the management of change. And it's highly philosophical, especially when you study conservation in the built environment. The degree at UCT is actually a master's in philosophy of conservation of the built environment. And we belong to a broader, bigger perspective of heritage, which essentially has this history, kind of like starting in the French Revolution. Obviously, before that, there was always an interest in the antiquities. There was always an interest in looking back, and the idea of the modern being any innovation on an existing building. Okay, so modernism has always been there as a kind of idea. But essentially, what happened was in the French Revolution, the French started burning their palaces, and the whole Marie Antoinette let them eat cake, and so on and so forth. And the French people sat up and realized, oh hell, we're actually trashing our own heritage. This belongs to the French people. These palaces are like, that's what defines us. So we actually need to conserve and kind of save this stuff. So they actually put this first like legal constraint in of like, you cannot trash this building. Okay, which started this debate. Through the 18th century, and I'm not going to talk to all the people who kind of did these movements, but through the 18th century, you had pretty much Pugin and Notre Dame and architects going on the grand tour across Europe to look at classicism. Classicism became cool. Archaeologists started digging around in Egypt. You've got Carter and Tutankhamun and so on and so forth. But in the 18th century, basically, you get approaches which look at in the French era, you've got Viollet-le-Duc, who actually talks to Notre Dame as a building that gets built, and he says it has to be like copied like perfectly. And even if you're replacing something new, it's got to be copied perfectly. So it kind of like loses its character. In the 18th century, there was a lot of Roman ruin across England. And we also see the rise of the Industrial Revolution. And you've got the picturesque comes in. So landscapers like Capability Brown come and basically trash all the Roman ruins. And people like William Morris, who was the arts and crafts wallpaper guy, and a whole lot of other people got together and they sort of said, we like this idea that there's a palimpsest, which is like a trace of what was past, and we need to keep that because that's the authentic part in the heritage. So it doesn't work to like fix the old fake stuff. So essentially we get 1931, we see the Athens Charter, and after World War II, we get the Venice Charter, because after the swathe of damages across Europe, we get the League of Nations, which our Prime Minister or government official, Jan Smuts, was instrumental in assisting them to broker. And this idea that we must never forget like what happened with everybody obliterating Europe. We need to set up this organization that values monuments and museums across Europe. And so heritage was very much built fabric. We haven't reached, like it's tangible, let's put it this way. So the heritage is tangible. We see UNESCO start up and we get the Borough Charter. And all of these are big like legal international frameworks where they have the convention like every 4 years or whatever. And one of the previous ones was in Japan, and they talked to the Nara document. And you see this shift happening in heritage where we start to see intangible heritage appear and living heritage. The Mediterranean diet becomes a UNESCO heritage thing. We get landscapes that become UNESCO heritage sites, like Isimangaliso and the Drakensberg and various places like across the world, you know, the various, there's the violin, the Stradivarsky, the the famous violin, which goes for millions and millions and millions. The craftsmanship of that violin, the workshop, is a UNESCO heritage site. So we start to see changes in heritage as not just a monument and a built form. It's like actually a living thing. So we start to raise questions on values behind heritage, authenticities, and significances. And that becomes like an international kind of move per se. So talking to the South African situation, we had our heritage kind of started with like in 1905 with the Bushman relics preservation thing. And then we moved through largely archaeological acts that get changed and changed. We eventually move into the 1960s, the Monuments Act. In the 1960s, you see the castle and the Voortrekker Monument and all of those buildings. Very colonial buildings become like heritage worthy. And then it moves from there. And in 1996, obviously, there's a kind of like dissonance in the Heritage Act because heritage is bigger and a whole lot of living heritage gets left out. So the legal people and the philosophical minds and the academics got together and they brokered the Heritage Act of 1999, which is quite an interesting act because it introduces graves, maritime, like shipwrecks, objects. You can't trot out your national, like we've just done, trotted out our National Gallery exhibition to South Korea without like following due processes. We obviously have to try and stop the artworks and objects disappearing. So they become nationalized. One very sad case is our golden rhino from Mapambukwe, which disappeared. So, stuff like that, we need a very tight, we've got the tight act. Unfortunately, the management we don't have. So anyway, the act gets written and the preamble is really interesting because it talks to heritages in South Africa and the value of heritage, which means is that every single one of you's heritage has value. It's not about that's a contested heritage, so it's irrelevant, and this one is the privileged one, which kind of runs directly away from the Cultural Revolution of China under Mao, where literally they just, both China and Russia just quickly threw out everything, Lenin and Mao, just nothing was allowed. And now you see the Chinese starting to go back and look at their heritages, which is quite interesting. Whereas our act is actually quite strong and it allows for healthy debate. No matter what heritage it is, there's healthy debate. We see a lot of it in the Cape, where like in Boerkaap, a lot of the buildings and the living heritage is argued for quite coherently. So effectively, in the built environment, we have two main clauses of the Act that basically affect us, two sections of the Act. And the Act is long, it's very long. It's got it goes up to section something way past 38, but it's got, where you can actually motivate for something to be heritage, and then various other sections. But the sections that we talk to are basically the section 34 section, which says that no person can alter or demolish a building older than 60 years, which is problematic because now half the houses in Highlands North are section 34s. So in Cape Town, Heritage Western Cape actually managed this, and the Act basically says that the minister must do the work and put a circumnavigation, or like a radius around an area and designate building A, T, that's graded, you keep. B, C, D, E, you can alter, and the rest can go. None of that work has been done in Gauteng. I mean, our heritage, the Frog, is just messy. There are like about 3 people that work there. And so all the legislative stuff is in place, but it's just managed really badly. So through GIFA, we actually spend time with Frog to try and like guide them. So section 34 somebody approaches you with an old house that you need to demolish or alter, you've got to put your Section 34 Act, your report in. It goes to the FROG, and now what's happened is building control with going online has got that tick box. Is the building older than 34 years? Bang, you need a Section 34 application. At the moment, anybody and anybody can do it, which for the heritage professional, there's a group called APHP, they're like the Association of Professional Heritage Practitioners. They are looking at professionalizing heritage because there's so much behind the scenes and there's so much, a lot of these Section 34 shouldn't even happen. It should just be able to be, no, you can demolish, and heritage applies to the bigger picture. So, so for now, anybody can do a Section 34. What APHD will do is change the Section 38. So Section 38 is when you consolidate 2 or more urban, when you've got a site that's bigger than 5,000 square meters, or you're running like a pipeline or a long distance of something, you have to do a full heritage impact assessment, heritage impact assessment, which is cuck onerous because it's got interested and affected parties, it's archival research, it's mapping, it's social significance, scientific significance, technical significance. And I had to do an I motivated for a Section 34 on a project at St. David's, Maris Brothers, because we were demolishing this irrelevant little house. And I thought, let me apply for an exemption. I told the client, you're going to need a Section 38. And the project manager said, no, we'll be fine. And I was like, okay, I can try. So I put in and I motivated for an exemption from Section 38 because the building was so irrelevant and it had been altered already. And the FROG came back and said, HIA. That HIA took me 5 weeks to write. There was no information. I had to go into all the archives to actually get stuff. So Section 38s are very hectic, especially on sites, for instance, like Modderfontein, where you actually have public participation, the comments get published. Oh, and the other thing with these Section 34 and Section 38s is everything needs to be advertised. So it's got to go into the town planning notices, and then there's a period that people can object. So if you get objections, then that's got to be managed, and it's quite an onerous process. So I've only ever done one of those. There are lots of doctors out there who've done loads, yeah. So having worked on kippies and eventually forming my own practice, my first real heritage building and the first time I interfaced with the FROG was I was appointed to do a library and a museum project at KES. And I had a building, as you can see, where there's a hole in the facade there. I had a building that used to be a gymnasium in 1906. And at some point, they had taken out the collar tie to the truss and mounted some rings and some gym equipment. And the poor building just went bleh, as it would, because you've now taken away what's holding it together. And we had these massive cracks on the front and the side of the building. So I got to site and I said to the client, no, we must make a hole in this facade so you can see the trees and the fields. And we must make a mezzanine in here so you can see out the top windows. And they said, I put together a pack, and I put together a pack, and I put the mezzanine down the middle of the building, presented it. They said, good to go. And then I woke up at midnight and I thought, oh, I've just trashed the space. I actually should have the mezzanine around the side. And I went back to them and I said, I made a mistake. Can I represent? And they said, fine. But that taught me something very valuable, and it answered Jen's questions. Value in building is not only in the finishes, it's in the space. We are architects. Our role is to create moments of wonder, and moments of wonder happen when you hit the sweet spot with space. And talking to dwelling, those little cornices and architraves and skirtings, it talks to dwelling and homeliness. We are spiritual creatures, and there's not enough of that in our society. We need more magic and wonder and so on and so forth. So anyway, so I put this thing together, and then I had to meet with FROG. And I had an issue where I couldn't get people from this side of the building at the back to that side. And Grant Botha said, "Ach, man, just build a bridge here." And I thought, oh my God, they're going to let me build a bridge. So I built a bridge in the building, and I learned a very valuable lesson. You can do anything, provided you argue it correctly, and it's cunning design, and it's beautiful. And people are terrified of heritage. Where there's a horrible portion of the building, demolish it. You know, everything can be mitigated. And you do that through your reporting process. And I talk to people all the time, can't touch this building, it's heritage. You can do a lot. And if you argue it correctly, you can get away with it. So we demolished that facade and we made a lovely garden, and we reconfigured the stone wall, and we built the library, which was inside. And what we did was because it was book load, we had to invert the bookshelves so that everything was hung, because I had no floor to work off. So we actually just put up this mezzanine, hung all the books off it. Doesn't look like this anymore. So note to everybody who's building, let go of your babies, because they change. The school has since changed this library, which I thought was very gentrified and philosophical and serious. They've now got like baby blue and yellow and plastic plants. I mean, I'm shocked. It was a very bad idea as far as I'm concerned, because it's more of a kindergarten than anything else now, but that's what they wanted. But another thing happened to me on this project, and it was such a challenge. I had just arrived back from Australia, and in doing the museum, I found this Union Jack flag in the museum. And I was like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? And I thought long and hard. And I mean, in this post-apartheid sort of, country, and I've just arrived back and all these issues are being debated. And I thought, no, it's a museum. Put it up. Put it in context. Explain what has happened, why it's there. What was very interesting for me in doing this work was I saw that during the 60s, the nationalist government hated the colonial buildings on the school campus. And there were even drawings in the pack, demolish, where they wanted to demolish the most gorgeous buildings so that they could put up, these classroom blocks, like the hostels, like these horrible, almost Germanic educational approach, because that frilly stuff is so last year. So it's quite interesting looking at how building typologies change and having that dialogue. And in the museum, so I obviously put up all the stuff. And interestingly, I'm actually part of the museum committee at the moment, and we're wanting to demilitarize the museum, which is appropriate for this day and age, because we don't want to kind of tell that story, but we also have to tell that story because it's part of what happened. These boys who were 15 put up their hands to go and fight in World War I, and they died. And so they started this memorial, which then became something greater that now has all these other layers, where other struggles, the Korean War, the border war, all of that got layered on. So it begs questions of authenticity. Is it authentic to add those names? For the school, you could argue not, but the school have made a decision to be inclusive and are talking now to the Native Labour Corps, Cape Corps. There's a monument in Company Gardens to the Cape Corps. So as a nation, we're starting to open up and actually acknowledge that everybody has the same hurts. There were people the Native Labour Corps, 20,000 guys went over. Then we had the Emendy in the Second World War. A whole lot of them died. I mean, they're on the ship because the ship sank. So nationally, it's really important to have these dialogues. And I was going through this as I was putting up the stuff. But these trophies that you see on the wall were part of the original museum. And Ian, the business manager, said, I do not want these trophies. Nobody wants these trophies in the museum. And and he wanted to sell them. And I said, Ian, you're selling the family silver. It's not part of where we are now, but put it in context. Museums started in the 18th century. Johannesburg never had a national history museum. There was one in Cape Town, there was one in Kimberley, there was one in Natal, in Port Elizabeth. No, none in Joburg. Yet the school started its National History Museum with pieces of rock and animal heads, and which spoke to a huge economy that was happening up in Uganda, Northern Rhodesia, Nyasaland, all of that. Educate the boys, let's tell the story, don't just erase it. And so we have this constant dialogue and debate about what we can keep. At this point, as long as they're not chucking anything out, I'm happy. Because the relevance now might be irrelevant now, might be relevant in 200 years for for a person who's studying the development of animal horns or whatever, to come and do the research. So for me, relevance is a very, very, very interesting question, which we are going through a lot. So then another project that I fell into was at the school, there's a very big clock, which was a Queen Victoria Jubilee clock, because the school was built in 1906. And this particular clock you see all over India, Singapore, even Sri Lanka, and every city pretty much in Joburg, and probably Kenya as well, because Queen Victoria had a Jubilee and they commissioned all these clocks, and all the buildings needed towers, because 18th century schooling, which was a very new idea, spoke to discipline, timekeeping, work to the bell. You got to raise little sausages for the factory. And that's exactly what these English public schools were doing. And we're still in that kind of like mind kind of paradigm, which is very interesting. So there's so many philosophical questions behind this. And one of the things that I'm questioning at the moment is this idea of masculine Christianity. In those days, education was irrelevant. You learned how to manage strategy and people on the cricket field, and you had to be a man of character. And the prefects would put you in place, not the masters. So it's a very inverted system to where we are now. And that those people of character had to be like harakat and out there. And we're changing all of that now, but that was what it was like then. So those clocks went up everywhere with the rail and so on and so forth. And essentially what happened was this clock, there was a tradition, or there is a tradition at the school, where the boys climb up into the bell tower and they put their ties and that on the clock hands. And because it's a mechanical clock, which has two faces, those ties get caught up in the cogs. And so the school fixed the clock and fixed the clock and fixed the clock. And eventually they just took their hands off. So the old boys got really cheesed because they wanted their clock working, and they contacted me and they said, we need to do this restoration. So try and thumbsuck a number on this. Like any quote for any job is the hardest thing to do. So I thumbsucked a number. Okay, a lick of paint, a little bit of copper restoration, maybe replacing some tiles. Boom arm crane. We can't scaffold. It's going to take too long. We had like a little window of about 3 weeks to get this restoration done. And thumbsuck, and then I went up onto the clock tower, only to find that the whole thing was falling apart. And I just thought, oh my God, I need to establish whether this has structural integrity. And it was a question of climbing up inside the clock tower, determining what the structure was, then going up on the outside on the boom arm, determining what was rotten. I had conversations with the Institute of Conservation Sciences in Cape Town about the state of the copper. All we did was we took the little top cap off and put it back together again, and then clad the flagpole in copper, which is still copper, but it'll go green. But copper lasts for like 150 years. So we're only 100 years in. Sometimes it can even go longer. So they assured me the copper's intact. You're good to go. So we just literally had to do the timber part. And this is what I love about conservation work. I was in the wrong industry. I need to be conserving oil paintings and beaded baskets and stuff. I so enjoyed this process because I had to take off the building all of these rotten moldings, bring them back to the office, measure them, find a shop fitter who could buy the right molds and cutters, And we brought Rhodesian teak in because it's like this really strong wood, and put it. And the guys were saying, "Oh, make precast cement and use like polystyrene." And I was like, it's got to be like done properly. So the headmaster was not very happy with me because we took a long time, but he wasn't paying. So in the middle of the process, this email got sent out to the business manager, but it came to me by accident. And the headmaster was like, "This should be a buildings and grounds project, and why are the old boys funding it?" And I got that, and I just sat down and I wrote this response saying, "I will hand you over for demolition by neglect," because that is a strategy that developers use. They buy a building and they just let it rot. And then they go, "Oh, it's neglected and it's broken, so we can demolish it now." And I say, "Your building's not watertight. It needs to be watertight. Sorry for you." And I made a very unhappy enemy. So we finished the job. We put all the molds on, sealed up all the joints, and left it there. The other question about heritage or heritages is buildings, people, we're all woven into each other. Ideas get appropriated. You know, the best example that I can think of is there's this beautiful book out there called Adornment and something, and it's a book on, it's a photographic study on people through Africa and how beads and the junctions of the body get celebrated through necklace and you know, cuffs and everything. And there's so many images of like beautiful Maasai people with like glasses that are made out of like paper clips that they've sat and made. The Ndebele culture where you've got the razor blade and the aircraft in Esther's facades. We're like this, we're woven together, okay? So I got approached to do a project at St. David's Marriott Brothers, which is currently on site. And I sat up one morning and I was like, Palazzo Ducale, Venice, Palazzo Ducale. And I was like, why have I woken up with this in my head? And I got on, and obviously it's a building that I'd studied in Australia. And I went and had a look at it, the Doge's Palace in Venice. And I liked the way the building had this horizontality. And I had been briefed to do a boarding house, which looked like the boarding house was there. And I just said, there's no way in hell I'm doing a boarding house that looks like that, because that's a really bad piece of architecture and it's not happening. I'm going to do my own thing. And so I presented a design to the school. My computer had been stolen. I had no laptop. And I said to them, can I do it by hand? Will I be like in detriment if I do it by hand? And they said, do it by hand. And I did the whole design by hand. And I spoke very much to the spirit of the boys at the school and how important it is to have, there's a path that goes down to the boarding house. So I said it must be a philosopher's path because the boys are going to walk backwards and forwards. And it's a monastic school. It's a Catholic school started by a French brother who came to Cape Town. The train came up to Kimberley. There was no rail to Joburg yet. He came on wagon with someone else to Joburg and started Sacred Heart in town, Marriott Brothers, the first one. This campus only happened in the 1930s. But when you look at Marriott Brothers campuses across the world, there's an underlying Catholic kind of architecture. And I really struggled with this and I grappled with like, oh, what can I do? How can I do it? We're in Africa. It's got to be appropriate for, for African conditions and different demographics and so on and so forth. And for me, it came out in the space. And monastic cells across like time have had cloisters. And in Muslim architecture, the courtyard is the most important thing. If you go to any mosque, they'll talk about the courtyard as being critical. And that's where God is, like God is in the courtyard. And so I presented the scheme with cloisters and courtyards and a barrel vault, and they were happy. They said, okay, fine, let's go ahead. And so very bad drawings, but they were like brand new back on the computer, got the design up. And I designed this facade that was, and I'm talking to value engineering here for Jen. I designed this facade that was a concrete facade that had the Maritz Brothers logo. And my vision was it's going to be a paneled facade and we'll crane it in. And they wouldn't build it and they couldn't build it and it's too hard and it's too intricate. And eventually I was like, okay, that's it. I'm changing the building and it's going to be brickwork and I'm going to take away the brise-soleil and rather just give them a cornice. And I had to bully my way through with that. But we saved a lot of money in the crane and the concrete, and we've actually ended up getting it. The client originally wanted also brickwork under the vault, and after pouring the concrete, he's this kind of sensitive person. I could phone and say, please don't put brickwork in this vault. It's so gorgeous. It's got this lovely concrete, like formed appearance. Let's rather keep. So we're on site now. This is the project now. Otherwise I would show you finished images. And that's the cloister, which has a pond and a tree. We'll have a pond and a tree. And then the facade is just me having fun. And I said to the client, these guys, these project managers, and they just give me a hard time. And he said, Joy, look at your facade. I don't think you're being bullied. I think you're bullying them. But it was a fight. It was you can build it like this. Here, we can't do it. Yes, you can. Here's a brickwork detail. Yeah, you cut a thing and you cut the plaster. No, we can't do it. It's going to mess up on the window. Eventually, Dennis came to me and he said, let's do like steps. I said, I don't want your steps. I want my coved cornice. It's an Italian building. It's got to look like the Medici Palace. So finally, they did it. And as an architect, you have to be clever because I couldn't leave the client with a painted facade that he can't high pressure hose. So the woman from Versus came out and we were looking at Versus, which is like a trowel on plaster. And I found this Versus product, which is natural quartz. And it's about 5 mil thick. So you can high pressure hose it. But it's sparkly. And I thought, shit, if I put that in the sun, they're not going to take it. So I said to them, put it in the shade here and we'll get the approval. And we got the approval and the building's going to sparkle. Hopefully, like not too badly. So let me just go back to where I was here. So for me, having projects on site that have interfaced with heritage, it happens in numerous ways through those Section 34, Section 38 applications, through critiquing constructs, looking at how paradigms are shifting, through critiquing your own design process, like, is this building appropriate? Are they going to like it? I have no cooking clue. Every project that you put out there, 50% love and 50% don't love. So you actually just, for me, it's a question of doing the right thing, raising the bar, creating a moment of wonder. The boys, I want them to be able to sit in their common room, and this barrel vault has like a Juliet balcony, which I'm going to do a timber balustrade, so they can sit up there and then obviously talk to their peers down below. The idea is to have this garden that again connects you to the universe. I'm pushing for timber hand railing on all my balustrades to try and bring some natural materiality into the house. Oh, because maybe there's a juxtaposition there. I did a heritage house in Houghton, which was 1903, that had a 1980s wing. We demolished the wing, replaced all the 1903 windowsills, and all the windows are leaking. And this client is horrible. And the whole house is built out of marble, steel, glass, and there's not a human bone of softness. So you can see personality to building type, And I just actually, after that, the experience with that project, I just found myself going to Gandhi's Kallenbach tents and looking at the little rondavel that he, under pressure, decided to fast, his satyagraha, to just basically fast as a peaceful protest. And I just remember having this epiphany and thinking, It's the connection to nature, the natural materials, the stone, the wood, that makes people amazing. When you remove them from that and make them mechanized and dehuman, then you're going to deal with someone who doesn't have soul. And my job as an architect is to have soul and to get wonder in there and fight for that. Because those QSs and developers, they want the cheapest thing. But invariably, there are actually numbers out there which talk to time and the rushed pace and 20% cost overruns. And then, of course, you've got the quality issue. The tender process is just mad. Why go for something cheaper? And I'm learning as an architect, when the QS is sitting in the project and saying, you've got 2 waterproofing materials specified. Can't we just use one? I will say, no, I've done the research. If you want to take one out and lower the bar, it must be minuted that it's your choice, not mine. Because my job is to raise the bar, leave you with quality, and actually push for that kind of sentiment. This idea that we have to cheapen everything, and it's just so last year. Anyway, so that's heritage through various lenses in a nutshell. Oh, please don't ask me political questions.
From the lens of architect who preserves heritage and preserve conscious heritage up to this point now, what gave a building soul back then, and how is it different to what gives a building soul today, and of course building the future?
I would argue the space. There's a generosity in space. There's an understanding in the small things like threshold, view, door, materiality, ritual, where those things, and level of care, where those things are considered, and you designing the best toilet in the world that's going to, really, or bathroom, let's say, that's really going to raise the status of conducting the ritual of cleansing. So the idea about washing and washing with a view, or eating with a view. So it's honoring ritual, it's honoring the soul of the occupier, the user, as opposed to them being devalued. And I see that, I remember arriving in Australia I must have been like 25, and grunge had just come in. It hadn't hit here yet. And I remember arriving in Australia and there were tattoos everywhere and people walking around in like broken clothes because it was high fashion. And that wasn't here. I mean, this was 1988. And I remember thinking, all the African people that I know in Joburg, the old tatties who polish their shoes and who have dignity, to me, that's it. It's dignity. It's not where you live, it's how you live. And so when I'm designing, my job, I think, is always to give you dignity and giving you a special view and a special walkway. It's the antithesis of putting the dustbin at the end of the axis, or the bog. I live in a house that's got the bog at the end of the axis, and I have to close my door all the time. It's irritating just because someone hasn't thought it through. Carry on. Next question.
Also, within preserving heritage, and what makes heritage is the history of where it comes from. And also the specific building that you work on. Would you say there's a heritage worth preserving, especially one now in more commercial projects that go up and easily get demolished like 5-10 years later? What would you say would be the heritage worth preserving in current times, let's say 6 years down the line, if there's any?
I think, I love the Thomas Heatherwick, I think it's Thomas Heatherwick, who said that there's a blandemic of architecture. I love modernism. I love Frank Lloyd Wright. I love mess. But yet there's a level of something that's missing. And so I remember when I was in Melbourne, there was this architect by the name of Nanda Katsalidis, and I wonder what happened to him. I'm sure he's gone on to do big, enormous buildings, but he was this Greek guy. And he did this building in North Melbourne, which was an apartment block. And at the bottom of the building, at the entrance, he actually had these very modern lines with a lot of copper, so it was quite green and bronze. And then he had this caryatid. Caryatid is the figure, the female figure that holds up the building, like in the on the Acropolis in the bank building. And I remember thinking, Nanda, you understand what you're dealing with, because you understand the articulation behind structure, decoration. There's so many languages and meanings in there. If any of you ever get a chance, there's a book called The Batamaliba, The Anatomy of Architecture, and it's about this tribe in Togo and Mali that basically live up in the hills, and so the Western influence where all the Portuguese forts don't get up there. And they talk about the anatomy of architecture as a way of building. They have an architectural discipline. So you start as a laborer where you source the clay. And I mean, sourcing the right clay that's going to be waterproof and everything takes a long time because it's got to grow to be fermented and all of that, like the mosque in Dijon when they stormproof it. But essentially, there's this architect process. So it takes like 5 years for the master to train. And they build this building premised on the building has its own soul, and it's got a jaw, and it's got a hole, which is like the breathing space, which is the oven upstairs, and that's where the family sit. And then when somebody dies, they dress the building up, and then they throw stuff at it because they're disappointed. And it's how the Gothic people looked at architecture. It's the layers of meaning, geometry, articulation in window, understanding of fractals, like all of that is in there. And it's thinking about building and experiencing building on those multitude layers. And yes, we need more of that. We need to allow decoration again. And, the practical form follows function isn't necessarily the best response, because it can make you feel a bit sad because there's no delight. So blandemic of architecture for me is great, but I still like contemporary stuff. Batamaliba, Batamaliba. The anthropologist who wrote it is Suzanne Preston Blear. Preston Blear, Blier. She's also written a book on understanding voodoo, which is also like, you think of voodoo as like the poking things in the dolls, but it's a very complex philosophical structure. So, pleasure. The point is, histories are wide and vast and amazing, and cultures like the Japanese, the Native Americans, the Aboriginals, they've all got magic. As Nguni Hut is a sophisticated building. It's been thought through. There's skill in the knotting. There's skill in the decoration. It's got hierarchies, all of that stuff. And I suppose it's the ability to learn to read that and then up your joy on looking at any building critically. Yeah.
How do you gauge the significance of certain portions of a building that you are like if you see a wall that maybe has a piece of graffiti on it, if it was done by a famous painter or something, it's just graffiti. Like, how do you gauge the significance between that type of thing?
So you grade it. You actually grade it. So you'll look at the social significance. So a very good example that I've never spoke to was you get different layers in how to look at a building. So for instance, the social significance of a building might be so incredible but the aesthetic significance is awful. For instance, Nelson Mandela's house in Vizilikazi Street is significant because of Nelson Mandela and the social significance. It's not architecturally significant. So you actually have these ways of analyzing significance. Is it of value to the community? How much pushback is there on a scale of X, or has it been graded before by a monuments council? There's lots of stuff that's worthy of demolition. But it's an onerous process to go through the social history, the technical history. Is it a building that's made out of like rammed earth and it's the first one in the 1940s type thing? Then it's technically significant or scientifically significant. So you've got various lenses that you look through. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Okay, cool. Thank you, folks.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks everyone online. This concludes our industry talks for this year. We will resume these discussions at some point during next year with our next talks. We thank everyone for attending. Thank everyone for coming. We hope for our students that this was of great value, and that you can take something away from this. If you don't, come and talk to me. But yes, thanks for everyone for joining. Have a phenomenal weekend, and I'll be in touch with those professionals who have listed their names for CPD points. Please remember to email me. Thanks everyone. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Just quickly end this here.